Good evening. Welcome to the penultimate December 2021, or the penultimate 2021 meeting of the Grafton Planning Board, specifically December 13th. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting of the Grafton Planning Board is being conducted with both in-person and remote participation by board members and members of the public. Remote participation by the public for the public comment agenda item, the public hearings, and any other matter for which the board allows public participation will be via the Zoom raise hand feature. If you raise your hand on Zoom, you will be enabled at an appropriate point to enter the meeting via voice or video to make a comment or ask a question. In all cases, whether in person or remote, please identify yourself by name and address for the record. And as one or more board members are participating remotely, every vote will be taken by roll call. And please note that this meeting is being recorded and as well as being broadcast live on the Grafton Community Television Government Channel. I'll begin by taking a roll of the board members. Mr. Wood.
I am here.
Mr. Hassinger.
I'm here.
Ms. Hassinger.
Here.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Here.
And Ms. McCormick.
Here.
Thank you. And you might guess that Mr. Robbins is here as well, just for the record. Staff present with us is our town planner, Christopher McGoldrick.
Present.
And we have various other attendees, panelists that are here for various items in the proceedings. So our first agenda item, as always, is public input. If there is any member of the public present tonight who wishes to speak to an issue that is not otherwise on the board's agenda for tonight, now would be the time to raise your hand and make your comment. I see no one in the meeting room raising their hand. I see no one on Zoom raising their hand, so we will proceed to our action items. The first of which is the determination of a minor modification at 104 Creeper Hill Road.
I will pull up the plan.
So,
yeah, so
what's going on?
So this project is the proposal at the Creeper Hill Road site. Looking at a one-story, 5,000 square foot structure to be added to the property. They're requesting this under a determination of minor modification, essentially saying that it would fall within the original permit with the modification to the plan as submitted. I believe the applicant and their engineer are present as well to provide additional information on the project as needed.
So, you're welcome to proceed to explain what you're doing here. You can
Right next to the podium?
use the podium, podium or the desk, whatever you're more comfortable with.
And is there a better side for the easel?
I think on that side,
On the far side? Cool.
I think you're able to capture it that way. And I'll pull up the
That's a good spot to see it. And if everybody can hear me okay. My name is Brian Nelson with Metro West Engineering. And we're here tonight to present a plan change for 104 Creeper Hill Road, and the applicants and the property owners, Andrew and Jim Russo, are sitting in the audience to my right.
Bob has
Dave?
his hand up.
Dave, we can't see what he's gonna show you.
I believe we can work with GCTV to make sure. I'll pull up the plans as shown. They should be on the screen now as provided, but we can also work with GCTV to show if there's anything different, we can show that screen as well. But as of right now, it looks like it's the same.
It is the same plan. The only thing that's different is I just added some color and some hatching to this one just to draw attention to a few things, but I can point at this if we go, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, my name is Brian Nelson from Metro West Engineering. Here to present a modification to a site plan that was approved in late 2016, early 2017 for the property at 104 Creeper Hill Road. Site contains about 15.3 acres of property. It's shown as Grafton Assessor's Map 17, Lot 8A. And for this presentation board, Creeper Hill Road is running from west to east on the bottom of the page. North is going straight up. The lot is a little bit irregular in shape. It's got some width down on the Creeper Hill Road side. It kind of necks down as it goes up around Flint Pond, and then it extends out. There's a peninsula up on Flint Pond as well. So Flint Pond borders us on basically the westerly side. And we were before you in 2016 for construction of a new building with a total footprint of about 12,000 square feet, located about 80 feet or so off the sideline of Creeper Hill Road. Basically, for a contractor's yard, there's an existing shed located west in the southwesterly corner of the property. And basically, this area is paved, presently serves as a contractor's yard for Russo Brothers. And what we're looking to do is to construct a 60 by 80 building, the 60 feet basically being the narrow side, 80 feet being the long side, on the westerly side of the property. It's about 75 feet or so from the northwesterly corner of the building. There is an access easement that runs along the westerly side of the property. There's the power line easement off property to the west. There's a 35-foot wide access easement that goes up, splits off, and off this page it goes up to the right to the cell tower, and then it crosses over the power line easement and provides access to the abutting property. So the new building's located about 9.5 feet off the sideline of that easement, 75 feet or so off the existing building at the northwest corner. And basically just it's for basically for cold storage of vehicles and materials. What we've got proposed is a infiltration system located north of the building that will basically capture and recharge the runoff from the roof surface of the new building. We've got an oil grit tank similar to what we've got for the existing building over here, basically to catch and store anything from floor drains inside. And really there's no real significant earthwork associated with this. Basically it'll be a slab on grade, basically frost wall construction, no basement. It'll be a single story building. And basically this area of the site is relatively flat, so basically it can just be placed right on grade. I can flip this board over if you'd like to see. We don't have a full set of architectural plans, but I can give you an idea of what the building will look like if you like. So these are basically some pretty
Yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
if Bill in there can,
yeah, if you
Put
can
that
zoom
on
over
the-
to this, and I can
on
move
video.
this if you need to get it in a better spot if you like.
yeah, it looks like he's aiming the camera in that direction.
Okay.
Let's see if he-
He's gonna have to flip it towards me, that the only cameras that I can get it. Yeah, perfect.
Does that work?
Yep.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay. Sorry you guys can't see it. I do have other.
We have a ways.
Okay. I was gonna say I have other hard copies, but basically the elevation on the right hand side shows 3 doors. This will be basically the side. This will be the easterly elevation, which faces towards the existing building. The 2 longer sides basically have man doors at opposite ends. One at the northeasterly corner, one at the southwesterly corner, and then the back of the building is pretty plain. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have, or if there's anyone in the public that has any questions, happy to answer those.
So basically, the first question before the board is, do we find this to be a minor modification? Because if we don't, then there is the necessity to proceed with a more complete filing.
Correct.
So, given that that's sort of the primary question before us, just a couple of observations I'll make is it appears that this, as you pointed out, involves no significant grading, no significant earthwork. This is not a change in use of the site,
That's correct.
and this is not adding any traffic because you're not, this is not accommodating additional employees or anything like that, or otherwise facilitating additional traffic. So there's that to keep in mind, I guess. With that, any questions or comments from the board?
My first question is: you said the site, if I heard it correctly, is where this building is going to be is already impervious surface.
It's basically a hard packed gravel surface at this point, so not quite fully paved, but still, it's a pretty compact gravel.
Okay. I think I saw Bob have a question too, if he wants to
Bob?
go.
Bob's nodding his head.
That's yours. If you have any more.
So,
Okay, well,
go ahead.
remember, this right of way over on the left side, the west side, was pretty contentious when we approved this. It was of considerable concern to the people who were out at the other end of it to the north. And I can't tell real well from these plans how a building placed that close to the edge or that close to the right of way might be an issue for that. I can't tell about distances and whatnot. Also, I'm not absolutely sure whether we should be looking at any of the drainage or any of that. But, well, I'll hear from Chris or someone about that.
Yeah, so I mean, this project, I think, in my opinion, kind of falls on that cusp of, requiring a full filing versus not. And so I think it's, that's why I wanted to bring it to the planning board first as the minor modification, if that's something that they felt comfortable with. In terms of the
Well-
stormwater, that would obviously be Graves peer review, which would happen in a full filing.
Okay. The person or persons out to the north, off that right of way, they would not have gotten a notice at this point or had an opportunity particularly to be alerted to perhaps wanting to make input on this. So a little bit, remembering, I don't know, I'm not sure how many of us were on this. Linda was, Dave was, I'm not sure who all. But we remember that you might not appreciate not knowing that this was going on.
If I
Or
can
you may be
speak to that,
quite
if I
happy
may.
with the way it worked out.
We did have, and I was here for the filing back in 2016. One of the neighbors, there were two neighbors up on Sergeant's Island, the resident who lived there full time, and there was certainly a contentious element to it. Doesn't live there anymore. And the other family, I think, just really has some seasonal access to the site. I don't think they use the property very much. So.
Something about housing a truck or trucks, and more than just a house with a car, as the traffic along that right away. So I'm a little uncomfortable with not having notice.
Yeah, I think it's probably, I remember quite well what, that, it was this right away that was the, sort of the major bone of contention, as it were. And that did end up getting resolved, perhaps not to everybody's 100% satisfaction, but it did, they did end up, I think the resolution there was, it was probably about the best that could have been achieved at the time. And given the proximity of this to the right, granted that this proposal does not touch that right of way, it comes, I think you said it was 9.5 feet off the right of way. That's it's sort of my first reaction to this is similar to Chris, was that it's kind of marginal. It's this is not terribly complex, but there is potentially a little bit of engineering here that we'd like to be. I think we'd like to be confident that that design is workable. Just as a suggestion, I don't know yet where we're going to come down on this, but one direction that we could take on this is to say, yeah, this is a little bit more than a minor modification, but from the looks of it, it would probably end up being, you know, fairly straightforward for us to deal with through the, you know, special permit site plan review, through the public hearing process. It probably would not take more than one or at most two sessions of public hearing to, you know, get this done in a more formal and more public way. But it's really kind of up to us collectively as a board to decide whether we want to go that route or whether we're sufficiently comfortable finding that this is a minor modification.
For me, just the idea of constructing a new, 4,800 square foot building is, with the associated drainage, changes for engineering here, it does seem something I would like to see grades for in general to give a peer review. And yeah, I wasn't here for the original permit, but it just struck me as
Yeah.
a little much for a minor modification. If there's more you have to say on why you think it's a minor modification, I'd be open to hearing that, but I don't know.
Excuse me. I guess our case for a minor modification is basically what this building is really proposed to do is to house and store materials that are presently exposed to the elements outside on the site. So it's kind of a cover for a bunch of materials and vehicles that are stored on the site presently. So I think it's a neater way of doing that, and a tidier way, certainly from the outset. We did leave, again, a 10-foot, almost 10-foot buffer between the sideline of the easement, so I don't see that as being an obstruction, to certainly anybody who would pass over the easement road or even for snow removal. And again, looking at basically placing it not on an area that's paved, but an area that's hard packed gravel. So looking at the trade-off of going from almost impervious to impervious, but mitigating that with a roof drain system that's basically going to contain the 25-year storm with no overflow. So looking at trying to address any anticipated impacts, and so that's certainly our thought. Again, looking at an area between one corner and the other, we've got about a foot of topographic relief, so not a lot of heavy excavation for this building and not a full foundation, basically just a 4-foot excavation for footings and foundation, and really not meant to be occupied by people. It's really just meant as a storage facility.
Yeah, I think just for myself, I think I could be comfortable going either way on whether this is a minor modification. Any other comments, questions from the board at the moment?
I have two questions, Dave, if I may.
Yes.
The first one is there any past precedents in terms of what is a minor modification? I was trying to Google out and see adding a retaining wall in one of the instances approvals was deemed a minor modification. But I was looking, first question was, is there any past precedents based on which we can come to a definition? That is one piece. The second one, is there a way wherein we can have a minor, I still feel, my personal opinion, still feel that this is not a significant construction development. It could still be a minor modification, but I do agree with Justin that, and I factor my words in. Is there a way, second question, is there a way that can this be a minor modification with notice to the abutters plus a peer review instead of going through the full-fledged special permit process?
So,
Yeah,
go ahead.
Suggestion that the other way around on that is to make it a special permit application, understanding that probably we'll be able to waive a considerable part of the submission material, so as to bring it down to the kind of level that you're talking about. I think
Okay.
that's think about that one as a possibility.
Yeah, just to answer your second question, Prabhu, as far as I know, there really is no formalized procedure in between us finding it a minor modification and going through the hearing process. One of the question of whether it's a minor modification is kind of subjective on the part of the board, And one of the criteria we do use on occasion when we're thinking about this is whether we think it deserves, we think the proposed change is of such a nature that the public should have an opportunity to weigh in on it by way of, a formal hearing and a public comment. But that's really, there's nothing hard and fast about it. It's really, kind of up to the board's judgment.
Okay, thanks, Dave.
And
How you doing? Andrew Russo, one of the owners.
if you could
Any microphone.
use any microphone so that the public,
How you doing?
our
Andrew Russo.
large fan base who's watching us on TV wants to be able to hear what you say.
Andrew Russo, Russo Brothers, one of the owners, Creepy Hill Road. The abutter in question that was causing, we had some back and forth before, is no longer there. It's been sold. The new people that own the property and the other abutter, we're in great standings. There's no issue, and they're in favor of expanding the property and better use. Puts more stuff undercover. I've spoken to both of them, and they've got no ill will whatsoever, and I can get letters from them to the fact also.
That's helpful to know.
Okay,
Because,
just figure let you know that.
those of us
The
who
biggest
re-
potential before was the back and forth of we all know we're not gonna relive it again, but
Yeah, we
that
don't
would
have
never
to.
happen again.
Right, and I think that's, that would have been one of my, just
Yep.
not knowing how the abutters,
Both in favor, and I can get letters documenting that.
Let's do that. Let's continue this until the
Thank
next
you.
meeting.
yep,
What do you say?
Yeah, and then I think it's, that with that input, it's definitely a minor modification.
Well, we can,
And we can move on it,
we
yeah.
can make it be
yeah,
Handle
so, right, so what I think I hear you suggesting is that we can, if the applicant can provide us with those letters, we can defer making a decision on this tonight. I mean, it's sort of informally continuing this, since this is not a formal procedure to begin with, there's no formal continuation. But informally, we can defer further consideration of this to our next meeting, at which time we can get the documentation from the abutters, letters of support. And with that, I think the only other question any of us raised was, questions about the adequacy of the infiltration system. But unless we feel that a peer review is necessary, we can, given the scale of this, it's sort of modest in scale. And, it may be that we're willing to take the applicant's word for it, that they've designed the system appropriately.
I'd like our record to contain something that actually amounts to engineering statement.
We can do a couple different things. Is we could put calculations on the face of the plan. If you'd like that, it kind of keeps everything compact. Or I can put a letter together, kind of summarizing the method of the madness, if you will. Or we can just put together a short hydrology summary. To me, it seems like a letter or putting the calcs on the face of the plan might be the easiest. It's all kind of tied together that way.
Yep.
The other thing I'd just like to point out is that as we have the building, it's about 45 feet off the property line. The westerly abutter it's land owned by the New England Power Company, and that's a 250-foot wide swath of high tension lines. So really, the only impact I would see to people who would be passing up and down that road, and that traffic is really pretty minimal.
Right, that's certainly very minimal in terms of traffic, and yes, this isn't likely to have an impact on a 250-foot wide power line easement.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I think, if the board's comfortable with this, put together whatever is, easiest for you to put together in terms of, supporting the design of the infiltration system. And, whether you end up just adding that onto the plan, or a brief letter or other form of document to accompany with, similar to letters from your, abutters on that right away, that be sufficient for everybody on the board?
Yes.
Yes.
Besides the power lines, that's the only neighbors they have.
I'm not gonna worry about the power company. They can take it themselves.
Now, you might worry what happens if one of the power lines breaks and falls off and falls on top of your shed, but
Well, we've got about I don't know, say 75-foot buffer. The power lines are here, so they're about 75 feet or so off the property. They're
Yeah.
pretty much centered in there, but that right of way is about 250 feet in width.
Yeah, and those high tension lines don't normally break, and I mean, if the high tension lines are falling down, there's probably bigger problems to worry about.
There's gonna be fairly soon, depending on the weather. But, yeah, I think the power company, usually tries to arrange, the design of those so that when their wires fall, they don't fall on somebody else.
Yep. I don't think we need to worry about that.
And
Do you want me to move to table this till the next meeting, or can we do this? Just
think-
let's do
I
it.
don't think we need the motion.
No, I think we can
Fine.
dispense with
I-
anything really
I'm
formal.
suggesting we move along.
Yep, I will just say for the applicant's knowledge, our next public hearing date is, well, our next date for our meeting is the 27th of December. But if you end up needing more time to do the holidays to get those letters and you want to, push it till January, the January meeting is
Yeah.
January 10th.
Yeah, just, you're right.
Just let the planning department know if the 27th doesn't end up working.
Yeah, you can just work with staff and they,
I think we'll try for the 27th, but if we have to, we can fall back to the 10th of the next
Yeah.
year.
yeah. So whenever you
either
get
is
the
great.
material together and into the office, they'll put it on the agenda.
Okay, appreciate your time tonight. Thank
Simple
you.
enough. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a nice holiday, everyone.
You too.
Are we actually going to meet on the 27th? I think we were a little bit open on that.
We'll leave that a little bit up in the air. We do have, one of
It
our
comes
public
up.
hearings tonight is requesting a continuation of the 27th. That may change.
I'm aware of that. That's why I'm asking.
Okay, have a good night.
Now, gentlemen, thank you. So, yeah, it's, I imagine we would like to, if it turns out to be feasible, we'd like to not have a meeting on the 27th if we can avoid it. And with these folks who just left, they will be submitting their information to the office, and it will appear on the first available agenda after office has received the information. So, moving on, we have another action item, and it's about 3 minutes before 7:30. The action item being the subdivision control rules and regulations revisions. We held our public hearing on that at our previous meeting. We have received comments from VHB, almost all of which were VHB pointing out the areas in the subdivision rules that may need modification, coming out of the findings of the MS4 review for low impact development. VHB did have one comment that pointed out a missing period at the end of a sentence. And that we will incorporate into our final draft, or our final subdivision rules. And at this point, it's on the agenda for the board to consider voting to accept, approve, adopt the subdivision rules and regulations as revised.
So moved.
Second,
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
and Mr. Robbins votes aye. The subdivision rules have been adopted. We will have to produce a final copy with all revisions accepted, and a clean copy, and transmit that to the town clerk's office, and from there it goes to the registry of deeds. So I'll work with Chris on getting the final, the final clean copy prepared, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, and you want to put it on our website also, on our section of the town website, so that we can download our own personal copies.
Yes, that will be done. We will see to it that
So-
all the administrative actions that are required to make the rules official and available to anybody who wants them. And with that, let's see, it is just about 20 seconds until 7:30. That's not enough time to take care of any, well, maybe it is. If I can skip down to bills, we have some bills to be.
Move we approve the bills.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the bills. It was basically a bill from Graves. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. The bills are approved and it is now 7:30. And our first public hearing is a continuation of the hearing on a preliminary plan approval at 348 Providence Road. And since our last, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, at our last session of this hearing, revised plans had just been submitted to the board. And my notes, what I have of my notes, seem to imply that the board wanted an opportunity to review the revised plans before closing the hearing. Am I remembering that correctly?
I believe so.
I believe the applicant's representative did explain to us at the previous session of the hearing what had changed in those revised plans. So, Chris, do we have anybody from the applicant who is here with us tonight? I believe it was Norm Hill who had been representing the applicant, and
I don't see him in
I don't
attendees
see
yet.
Norm on the. In any case, if there is nothing further to be added, if there's no new information that we need, or any questions that we have, keeping in mind that this is a preliminary subdivision plan and we can expect more details when the definitive plan comes back into us. Bob, did I see your lips moving?
Yeah. I move that we close the hearing and direct staff to prepare a draft decision
Second.
based on all the information we've gathered.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Justin,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabhu,
Aye.
and Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. This hearing is closed and staff will be drafting a decision for the board to review at the next available opportunity.
Dave, can we wait a minute? Linda needs to go get something.
Aye.
Okay.
All right. Moving on then, we have our next hearing, which is another continuation of a preliminary plan approval, this one at 124 North Street rear and a variety of other addresses. This, we have received a written request from the applicant to continue the hearing to December 27th. I'm assuming that the applicant is continuing consultation with the abutters, and that's the reason for the continuation?
Correct, yeah, so last we heard they were discussing with the abutters some configurations in terms of the driveway that runs along the proposed access route and how that would be configured amicably.
Yep, I did notice that some information from the applicant, and including a revised plan, has been received, I think since the last time we held a hearing on this. But until the applicant is ready to come back to us with some sort of a finalized agreement with the abutter, the plan is still subject to change.
Do we have the applicant available to us tonight? To ask about the date.
Let me just look.
I don't see him on the call.
I don't believe so. No.
Well, I'll make the motion that we grant the applicant's request to continue the hearing till December 27th at 7:30 p.m.
There doesn't seem to be anyone in favor of a meeting on the 27th. Justin. But procedurally, can we just say it'll be on whatever it is, the January meeting, without them agreeing?
I'd be a little bit apprehensive of that without having their confirmation.
Yeah.
I don't expect that would be an issue, but without them saying that, I can't speak for the applicant.
Yeah. My only comment on that as a whole, even though December 27th isn't that appealing, it is on our approved meeting schedule that we did set up the end of last year.
Yes, we did schedule a meeting for that date. And I might suggest that we grant the applicant's request to continue to the 27th, but we also communicate with the applicant the possibility that, if that's the only thing that would be on our agenda for the 27th, that we would ask for the applicant to authorize the continuation to the 10th.
I believe
Right,
we
we
would
probably have to approve both requests so that if they do make the request for the next meeting, the January meeting,
Right, so,
we will have
So-
granted the request.
right,
I
so,
so
I'll
moved.
modify my motion to say that we grant the applicant's request to continue the hearing until December 27th, and subject to the applicant additionally requesting a continuation to January 10th, we grant that in advance.
so we grant in advance a request to continue to the 10th, if such a request does appear.
So moved, or seconded.
Sounds good to me. It's kind of an unusual situation, but I think that's the best way to handle it, is to deal with what we have on paper before us, or paper in quotes.
meets the criteria of time and date certain. So
Yep.
I move the question.
With no further discussion,
Aye.
Mr. Wood, Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
and Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. We will see these folks either on the 27th or the 10th of January, depending on what works out. With that, we are now ready to get to work on the continuation of the request for special permit and site plan approval at 244 Worcester Street. I believe the applicant has a few things that have transpired since we last met, and probably would be appropriate for the applicant to bring us up to date on what's happened with the project, at least from the applicant's perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Mark Donahue from Fletcher Tilton on behalf of the applicant. There has been a fair amount of change to the plan since the last time we met that is worth reviewing. Based upon the feedback you provided the last time we were together with regard to reserve parking and the design of that reserve parking into the site in order to be in compliance with the requirements of the Grafton zoning bylaw as presently drafted, the building, and this refers to a set of plans that have been formally filed with your office, and you have it. But the building in question has been reduced from 368,900 square feet to 331,700 square feet. As part of that reduction, we heard comments received from board members and from the public during the course of the public hearing process. Our original plan had been to request a height waiver of up to 45 feet for the building. That has now been reduced to 36 feet in order to try to better comport. And the building facade has continued to evolve in some of the landscaping, and we can review that in some detail, but that's also in your plans that you have. I'm glad to talk about any of those things. We have just fairly recently received your peer review from Graves Engineering as to engineering comments. There doesn't appear to be anything that can't be worked out by the engineers, and Sam Hemingway from Garofalo is on the at the call, I believe, are available. And I believe we're going to be able to respond to those comments with a written response to your board, and then obviously follow it up with plan modifications as appropriate. We've had a fair amount of discussion during the public hearing process regarding traffic and concerns of traffic. You appropriately sent that out for peer review by MDM, who just this week, or strike that last week, submitted a fairly detailed analysis of the traffic. They requested some additional data from our consultants, Vanessa Associates, and Jennifer Connor is available if there are any particular questions with regard to that. And also asked that we look at some process for potentially mitigation steps, including but not limited to a left-hand turn lane into the site. So we have those requests. We believe that they are fair requests. We're going to try to gather the data and analyze it and try to be able to digest that and bring it back in a more comprehensive fashion. Right now it would be a little early because we just recently got the comments and really haven't had a chance to digest them in any fashion. So we didn't want to just continue this evening without doing anything because we had made material changes to the plan to respond to concerns expressed by the abutters and concerns expressed by the board. We think we're on a path toward the traffic. In addition to the MDM comments, I would point out that the project has gone through the MEPA process at the state level. That includes written comments provided with regard to the project as required under their process by Mass DOT, who provided a written correspondence, and we can make sure it's part of your record, that they had no objection or comments to the proposed plan. So we've moved through that process. So I think we're making progress. We're going to need some additional time to digest the primary issue that we've heard, which is traffic, and look forward to working with that in the new year. Be glad to try to answer any particular questions you or the public may have.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty much where I expected you would be as of tonight.
It's good to get something right today. That's good.
The MDM peer review was dated December 3rd, I believe, which is just barely over a week ago. And the Graves review was like this past Thursday. So I was quite confident that you guys, as diligently as you may work and want to make progress on this, a few days or a week is not enough time, particularly with the traffic peer review. MDM did raise a number of interesting issues and questions and recommendations I'm confident that you want to do a good job of reviewing that and responding to that, and I know that definitely takes more than a week. So
that's accurate, Mr. Chairman. In fact, the MDM report requested that we actually gather some additional data
Yes.
and be able to do that. And obviously, there's a lag period of time to be able to make those arrangements to be able to do that. So we're endeavoring to get it done, and hopefully can get it done as quickly as possible. We can certainly discuss an appropriate date for continuation so as to not clog up your agenda.
Yep. Now, any observations, questions, comments from the board on this?
Yeah, for me, I have a few things that stuck out like a sore thumb from the MDM's peer review, and I just wanted to mention them and see if you are prepared to respond in any way at this point. The two biggest things for me is both in the traffic volumes, where they basically described the 16%, 29% adjustments that need to be increased from what your consultant provided. That seemed very, very under measured from how I read this. And the other piece is similarly in the trip generation, where they said specifically these trips estimates range from 183 vehicle trips during the weekday morning peak hour and 198 vehicle trips during the weekday evening peak hour. And I think I read the wrong line. But, sorry. So yeah, 300 total employees result in a trip activity levels that are more than twice those provided in the analysis. So those points struck me as very concerning. And I didn't know if you were prepared to respond to them at this point.
I'll hit it at a very high level, then I'll ask the consultants to try to be able to do that, particularly as to the trip generation. It's a fair comment. They asked it in two different fashions. One is to actually the difficulty of not having a user and being able to identify it. So we're looking at some comparable developments in the general areas to be able to demonstrate empirically some comparison as to what traffic volumes are. This is an area that for traffic consultants essentially is emerging technology to some extent. Warehouses used to be one thing, now they constitute an awful lot of different things. And we can certainly have some chase down on that. Another issue with regard to traffic generation that they asked specifically was the juxtaposition between the anticipated traffic flow to the site and the parking provided. And we think the answer really falls within the bylaw, as we've talked about previously, that we've gotten pretty clear guidance to comply with the bylaw, whether that's a requirement or not. But we'll try to chase that down with MDM and resolve it. I don't know if either Jennifer Conley or Scott Thornton are on and want to add anything to that.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Mark. This is Scott Thornton with Vanessa Associates and members of the board, Mr. Chairman. As Mark indicated, we are just getting into the MDM comments and expect to provide full responses in writing. One of the things related to the initial comment that was made by the planning board member regarding the traffic volume increases and adjustments. When we developed the adjustments for traffic volumes due to the COVID pandemic effects, we followed the procedures in the Mass DOT guidelines for adjustments. That said, it's not unusual for a more, a more conservative adjustment to be applied, such as what MDM is requesting, based on not a single adjustment factor, but varying adjustment factors based on daily and hourly time periods. And then with regards to the second comment with the trip generation, again, as Attorney Donahue mentioned, we're sort of we have some estimates for employees, but in general, we were following the land area as the variable for generating trips. Since it's been mentioned that or requested that we take a look at the employee total, that we will do that. There's other instances regarding employee totals, so that employees may not all be there at the same time. They may operate in shifts. And all of that is sort of difficult to pin down at this point without having a tenant, but we expect to discuss some of these items with the client and provide some more detailed responses moving forward. Thank you.
Anything else, Justin?
Not at this time.
Bob, Linda, Prabhu?
It really isn't involved with them. It's just a question to Chris. Chris, it's really a petty point, but I think that on the agenda, the last exhibit, which is emails from the State Department, from the Health Department, I think that's not this case. It's the Grafton Life Science Center.
I had the same confusion, and when I followed the link on one of these things, it was very clearly this project. It's just
Yeah, it's a name that we haven't encountered associated with this project, but when you get down to the bottom, I did the same thing that Justin did, that I found this project, there's a web page that calls it the Grafton Life Science Center. Don't know where that name came from. Maybe that was an anticipated use of this when this property was being marketed somewhere early on.
Okay.
But
'Cause
yes,
it's not very clear.
I had that confusion too. I had to read through that email about twice before I figured it out.
Yeah, well, it's quite bothersome when you follow the link and you read that page or all that material. They're talking about a wide range of uses, multiple tenants, and so on, and different uses. That's gets us back to people are afraid of what's going to happen here.
Yeah,
And,
so
what it might actually become rather than what we're looking at right now.
yeah, so in terms of those materials. I didn't include those because obviously the materials that are presented to the board are what the board is deliberating on. What was included was the emails that I did feel were important, was questions from the Grafton Health Department in response to residents reaching out to them in regards to this project. So I did include those as the exhibit. We did include those as Exhibit 49, and I essentially clarified that seems to be related to the 244, this project, and reminded them of the dates that we have the hearing. So I think the Board of Health is well aware of the proceedings,
Okay.
including the initial
Little explanation. Thanks.
publication that went out to them. So.
Maybe we can ask a little bit about, there are a lot of people out there who are concerned about this. There's upwards of 50 with us right now, in fact, not counting whatever might be in the meeting room. A lot of people are concerned about it. A lot of people are asking questions in one place or another. Most of them are not familiar with this process and how to really make effective input. So I'd like for us to make extra effort to make clear to everyone why we're going the way we're going and why we're looking at certain things and all of that. One thing that keeps popping up is people keep saying we should require the site to be cleaned up from the historic problems before we approve this. And I think we need some more clarity for those folks. I think I understand, but for all the audience, what the story about that is and what or why we can and can't look at it. Does that make any sense?
If that's intended, Mr. Hassinger, no question to the applicant, I could try to answer, but if you were addressing Mr. McGoldrick, I don't want to step on his toes either, so.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just kind of stepping back a little bit in terms of the uses on the property. The proposed use here is for the industrial warehousing facility as presented. If there's a future change in use related to the marking materials that's significant enough, again, that would come before the planning board. In terms of any past issues with the site, I think that was addressed in previous public comments. There are kind of federal standards in place as well as state standards in terms of what may be on site, and this project is still beholden to those. I'm not sure in terms of additional review that the planning board has the authority or the wherewithal to review, but that's something if we want to look further into that, we can do some look, but there are those protections already in place in terms of the regulatory process outside of the planning board.
Right. I think with respect to some potential environmental concerns, a complication for this particular project is that this particular project is on one portion of I forget what it is, 160, 190 acre Wyman Gordon site. And those of us who've been around for a while are aware that there have been issues of various kinds on various parts of that property. But in general, I think this, as far as I know, the project under consideration by this board would be fair to consider dealing with, or the potential for having to deal with problems that may exist in the area of this project. And if there is documentation of an environmental issue that is known to affect the area of this project, that's something I think the board would be interested in, whether the extent to which the board would deal with it. I mean, a lot of that is under the jurisdiction of other agencies, so there would be a question.
That's
of
what
the
I'm trying to
extent.
nail down, Dave. Is it, we want to be sure that the site that we're looking at and permitting now, is okay. What we can do about the rest of the property through this permit though is, I'm trying to establish for people that
Right.
we
So-
can't do that. There's a federal process. With the federal process, I think you said, Dave, would it be the way this base gets covered?
Let me at least address the piece that my client has under agreement and at least give you some color on how this issue is dealt with regard to commercial real estate. And it starts with both the federal and even more applicable often the state statutes with regard to hazardous waste, as that's a defined term in the statute. And what the law basically says is that the owner of a site in which there's been a release or a threat of release of hazardous waste is strictly liable, without any issue with regard to culpability, to address it, to remediate it, to report it and remediate it. And that's a hard stop. That's what the law says. So it is common in commercial real estate that as part of diligence, a purchaser does an investigation of that. That doesn't always involve intrusive testing. It depends on the conditions that are done there. And it moves forward. What's important is to recognize that the developer, in this case, should they move forward with the acquisition, steps into that chain of liability individually to deal with it. And that's enforceable by the state, and it's enforceable by federal authorities in some fashion also. That's a long-winded way to say that's somebody else's process to some extent. Your process is how land gets used in your town, and whether it has to be remediated, and remediation has a lot of different terms. It's a fairly complex place of the law. It doesn't mean that it has to all get dug up and cleaned up. It means a lot of different things by which there's a whole process you go through. Is really beyond the scope of the issue of whether this is an appropriate place for a warehouse. It's fair for you to assume that's going to happen. As to the use, I think what the issue is, to the extent people are concerned of what it is now will stay what it is in the future, is to be clear that, and I'm probably lecturing to the choir looking at the planning board, but that Mr. Hassan just suggested maybe this is really for others, is that should this board decide to grant a special permit, it will do so subject to very specific conditions of approval. And those conditions of approval are enforceable not just by the planning board, but by the zoning enforcement officer, including but not limited to a violation leading to a cease and desist of operation. That's the protection. So when we say the term warehouse, which is a term that's got a fairly broad definition, and you've got concerns about traffic relating to it, we would, should you be inclined to approve, be anticipating that we would be defining to some extent what that is vis-a-vis the traffic impacts as projected by Mr. Thornton and his company, and have some protections that if it were to change, you'd get a second bite at it, you get a second look at it.
Yeah, so part of the process you're referring to, I believe, is a lot of us know by colloquially as a 21E.
Correct.
And that's basically when, I think, just to sort of reiterate what you were saying or repeat, what I think I'm understanding is, in my recollection in general, the 21E, that's typically something you would do before taking ownership.
Definitely.
Because that would alert you to any liability that you might be contemplating undertaking. So you want to kind of know what you're getting into before you buy a piece of property.
Correct.
And that's independent of any planning board decision or anything else.
Absolutely.
But
It's
what's good
analogous
business.
in commercial real estate to making sure that the seller has good, clear, and marketable title.
Now, I have a hand up here on Zoom from Richard Bakari.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board. My name is Richard Bakari. I'm the principal developer from Churchill and Banks. And sometimes I think, especially members of the audience that are listening in could probably get a little bit frustrated with some of the technical and legalese type of conversations that happen on these hearings. We've been doing development for a long time, and I just wanted to chime in on two items that have been raised tonight. One, on the environmental condition, you know, before we go too far in any purchase of any project or property, would spend significant amount of time and effort hiring our own consultants to make sure that what we plan to do is feasible. And if it was contaminated to the point that it was not feasible, we would not proceed with the property or the project at that point. We've been working on this for well over a year. We've got two environmental consultants that have reviewed the current situation of the land that we are buying. And from what we understand, that piece of property is deemed clean from an environmental or development standpoint. And so, you know, that is where that stands. I just wanted to kind of go on the record and make that statement that if this was a contaminated piece of property that would cause, you know, issues, we probably wouldn't be at this point, you know. Now there's the other item that was raised regarding the life science website. That was simply a marketing website specifically for life science manufacturing and warehouse industries. As we go out and we try to attract different end users to the site, we try as business people to cast a wide net and to find, you know, whatever potential businesses may be out there looking to expand. And obviously, you know, the medical industry and the life science industry is large in Massachusetts and is significant. So, I mean, that doesn't change that this would be a different type of use. It was just kind of marketed towards those type of users. So, anyway, if there's any other questions, I'm happy to chime in again, but I know that sometimes it's best to hear it kind of straight from the horse's mouth versus through engineers and lawyers. Yes?
Okay, I wanted to then close out because the impression I've gotten is I even asked about this, I think, in a previous meeting, but trying to understand the area on the total Wyman Gordon property where this famous contamination is or was. Would it be true that the part that you're looking at does not include any of that? That is on other parts of the property. And so
I can't speak for other parts of the property because I've only focused on this part. So, but this part is, you know, from our review and our environmental engineer has cleared it that we can develop this parcel, and there's no additional work that needs to be done to get it into compliance. If there are other parts of the Wyman site that are, I'm not aware of that. It's not, you know, it's not my business, so to speak.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to the point I was attempting to make, is that as for as many problems as some of us are aware of that have occurred someplace on the Wyman property, the area of the project that we are reviewing tonight is, as far as, you know, as you just said, Richard, you guys have been looking at that, and yeah, that part, regardless of what may have happened on anywhere else on the Wyman property, the part we're dealing with tonight is, so far as you know, is known to be clean.
Correct.
All right. And is that the point you were trying to make, Bob?
And this process can't have anything to do with other parts of the Wyman Gordon property. In other words, we're not going to be able to make them clean up stuff that's not on their land.
Right. We're dealing with just one part of the property. No.
I think that when I see people making comments, I think that they're not really aware of that either. The fact that if there is different places on the property and where this one is, and also what we can do about any of it.
And I suppose one further point to make is that if someone believes that this portion of the property does have a problem, it would behoove them to bring it to the attention of the appropriate authorities, which is unfortunately not the planning board. You might start.
Oh, fortunately.
From my point of view as a board member, I'd say fortunately, but Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if there is something that the applicant is not aware of, they should be made aware of it through more appropriate channels. Be that as it may, I'm still looking for other comments and questions from the board. Do you have
Yeah.
anything else, Bob? Prabhu?
Yes, sir. I had two-part question. The first one was I asked in the last conversation, last meeting about the passenger car equivalency. I know it's posted on the website. I couldn't find that either I couldn't find, it was not there on the original traffic study. I couldn't find any mention of it on the peer review. And that basically addresses the fact that in the original traffic study, if we talk about during peak period, 4 trucks coming in and 4 trucks exiting, and that is just counted as a total, when you add the cars to the trucks, it is counted as 1 truck equivalent to 1 car. But that doesn't seem to be the standard traffic engineering guidelines. It says anything between 2 to 3 times a passenger car equivalent for 1 heavy truck and so on and so forth. So that is one question I'm trying to get an answer from, I guess, Mr. Thornton. That is the first one. The second one, I made a note of it. I understand this is the larger question about this project, and I'm trying to understand how do we even think through a decision-making process. And the question is, I understand this is a sale between 2 private parties, but as a planning board, is the planning board the right authority to think about, I call it Mr. Hassinger's doctrine, wherein what is the benefit to the town with this project, right? Towards calculation, and when I try to calculate what's the benefit to the town, is there a projection of what's the potential revenue for the town? And then what is the total cost of ownership? I get the cost of development from the promoter, that's one part. But to address, say, for example, mitigate traffic concerns, if you have to develop this into a 4-lane road, just making that up, that's a cost of ownership. We as town people are going to be paying for that piece. So do we ask these questions to understand what is the overall benefit to the town in factoring in what is the cost of acquisition of this project? So 2-part question. First one, passenger car equivalency. Second, should we ask those questions? I feel that as a citizen in Grafton, I want to know these answers, that this project is going to cost the town $10 million and we are going to be spending $15 million, all random numbers. Is this even viable? So any thoughts, inputs?
Scott Thornton with Vanessa and Associates, Mr. Venkataraman, I will take the first question, and I think the second question is a little over my pay grade. But as far as the passenger car equivalency factors go, they're in the appendix of the document where we calculate the delays and the capacity analysis of the intersections. I don't have that number or those numbers in front of me right now, but we can absolutely include that in a response document that goes to MDM as well as the town, where we explain a little more about how the addition of the trucks changes the truck percentage and the heavy vehicle percentage in the analysis, and make it clearer to understand where that's coming from.
Yeah, in terms of a cost-benefit analysis, I don't know how easy it would be to get a real handle on that. Yeah, it's easy enough to measure the revenue, the tax revenue that development could bring into the town. But in terms of the costs that it might impose on the town, it's probably generally hard to quantify. I mean, if you're adding roads, for example, adding lanes on roads, then there's, to some extent, the cost of that. Maintaining roads could be quantified, although in this case here, that road is it's a state route, and I don't remember offhand whether it's under control of the state, or if the state takes on the cost of maintaining that road. So that's not a direct cost to the town. Some things that you might think of as cost to the town, maybe, yeah, you can recognize that there's a cost, but you can't quantify it. And then there's the question of the of a non-quantifiable costs and benefits, and you can kind of wave your hands and talk about that in generalities. You've got, I don't remember if we have a means of really accounting for that, in a planning decision.
Mr. Chairman, I don't mean to interrupt, but if I may, to address that to some degree, I don't think there's any direct costs that the town would incur through the development of this project, aside from a potential, an occasional ambulance call or a police call or something like that. That's a routine, emergency call or something like that within the warehouse or something like that. But I mean, realistically, this is going to create hundreds of jobs. So to me, I would think if you look at the net, is it a cost to the town or a liability to the town? It would seem from a financial standpoint to be, a net benefit financially to the town. And I don't know if that's exactly what the question was geared towards, but to me, it is a state road that's maintained and plowed by the state. So I don't think there's any main cost. A lot of times when you're looking at projects that have residential components, you have to measure the costs of school children and, those types of things as to how it impacts the school system. What's the cost of education? In this case, it's really pure income from a real estate tax and a employment base.
So I think right. I think at best, we could contemplate, sort of I'm not even sure what to call it, but sort of a kind of an abstract or not necessarily quantified description of what we think the costs and benefits are in monetary and non-monetary terms, and then then look at that in the light of what criteria the board can and cannot use in making a decision. And I'm not prepared to speak to that to any depth tonight, but it's worth at least keeping in mind of taking a look at the extent to which we can think about cost and a cost benefit trade-off in the context of what the zoning bylaw allows us to take into consideration. You wanted to add something to that, Chris, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, as the discussion points out, that the quantification can be a little bit difficult with these analyses. One of the things that I've seen for commercial is in terms of, just to the Mr. Bakari's point of the ambulance services. What I've seen some more in smaller communities, if a cost analysis, if a additional fire engine or fire engine with additional equipment was needed for a certain development, typically residential, needing an additional ladder truck, and the fire department indicating that they would include that as a cost, a potential cost to the town. I don't think that we need that for this particular project, but I can circle back with fire department on that point directly if they're anticipating any costs with this specific development.
Yeah, just as a side comment to that specific point of the fire department, I believe I can remember at least occasionally in the past certain developments, not of a nature like what we're talking about tonight, but certain things like maybe the biosafety lab up at Tufts, where there was some fairly unusual characteristics of the project that appeared to necessitate some special purpose equipment or special purpose training from the fire department. So that's the kind of thing that can sometimes come up. I don't see an opportunity or a reason to think about that in the context of this particular project. So sorry to interrupt you.
No. And then in terms of the traffic impacts, again, it's probably somewhat hard to quantify a monetary impact in terms of that. What I've seen in some cases, and probably would recommend here if amenable to both the applicant and the board, would be a condition where post-occupancy there's a traffic study done by the applicant, and if those are found to be significantly different from the traffic study as presented, that the board and the applicant would review options for additional infrastructure improvement. Again, I'd have to check with Mass DOT because this is a MassDOT controlled road and what that involvement would be in terms of this. But that's a condition I've seen in some other
Yeah,
projects.
and I will note that MDM talked about that in their review.
Yeah, they had some interesting items in there, looked like ongoing, more or less ongoing permanent counting, something of that sort. But I want to see the revised traffic study and then the revised peer review of the study. But what we're talking about here is, I've been thinking about a lot, and I'm concerned with overall there's an unusually large block of concern in the town about this. It's unusual. There's, when you go there and you look at the rendering along the north side, the Wyman Gordon side, and you look at what's on the other side of the road, it brings us back to one of the findings that our bylaw requires us to make, which is compatibility. That is, if we don't find compatibility, then presumably we shouldn't approve the project. So that ends up being a judgment call. How much impact is there? Is there anything that compensates for that? Things like improvements in traffic that for the folks who live on the other side and for the folks who drive through there or whatever. I've seen, I'm aware of a good many people not happy. I've seen very few people who have anything to say positive about it, including the rest of the town government. I haven't seen anybody tell us that this will help our taxes by some amount, or that the economic development, put a handle on that. I wonder if the selectmen support it. I wonder if the town administrator supports it. Ordinarily, we wouldn't ask quite that. We don't take votes on who supports and doesn't support out in the community. But in this case, we're going to get down. I'm going to get down to that vote on that requirement, and that's going to be a balance based on the inputs that we've had.
Well, let me touch on a couple of points, if I might, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
This presents one of the more difficult types of zoning decision that can exist and has existed in my career, which goes back more than 35 years. Often when you have industrial land abutting residential land, it's backland. There's a subdivision on that side, comes this way. There's an industrial road here, comes this way. They get in the back in some fashion. And bylaws deal with additional setbacks, sometimes codify it, and you're able to deal with it here. Here you've got a well-established, fairly dense neighborhood directly across a state highway from land that this community has decided should be used for industrial purposes. It's had plenty of chances to change that if that wasn't the intent from planning. It's been through a planning process, a master planning process, and it's always been industrial. Beyond that, it's a priority development site as voted by this town. That means you want to see it developed, and assumingly you want to see it developed for industrial purposes because that's what it's zoned for. That doesn't mean that these people here and the people that are on Zoom don't have valid concerns. They do. They have valid concerns, and we have an obligation to do the best we can to mitigate those concerns and try to address them. But the answer can't be nothing, and at some point that's what it comes down to, because the other balancing of the benefit to the town is the right of a property owner to use his property consistent with the bylaws that are established. And there has to be a use that's out there. So I would suggest that there's gonna have to be a showing that this use somehow creates some unusual burden upon the neighborhood that can't be balanced in that fashion. It's too early to say whether we're there or not, because I think a lot of it comes down to traffic. You know, we can talk about the facade, we've made changes to it, we're glad to hear more comments to that and the landscaping. But this is gonna come down to traffic, and we really need some more feedback now that we got some from MDM to give us a chance to try to digest that and see if we can come up with some things that maybe not alleviate everything, but can mitigate it.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fair. On my part, I'm not prepared to say a whole lot about traffic because I want to see.
Sure.
I'm waiting to see.
I'm hoping we won't. So,
I'm waiting to see what comes out of the continuation of the evolution of the traffic analysis. So that's it.
I think that's prudent
I'll
for
have
all of us.
I have a number of questions. Some of them are probably going to be answered, by the work
Yep.
your traffic people and MDM continue to do. So I'm not going to go too far down that particular thing. But one of the comments you made just sort of reminded me of something I thought of not too long ago, that we do not have and did not provide for here in Grafton, but would have been probably a good idea, at least in hindsight, and that is where we have a case like this. I'm not sure if this is absolutely unique in Grafton, but this is sort of a good example of where you have an industrial property, existing industrial use, bordering on a residential neighborhood right across the street. Now, some places have defined what, I think for lack of a better term, I would call a buffer zone, sort of, where you have that kind of a boundary between two, between a residential and a what could be a relatively intense industrial use. You might set aside maybe the first 100 feet or something, in the industrial zone. You might, where it borders a residential zone in a case like this, your zoning could, but we don't, put some additional constraints on the development near that boundary. So perhaps if we'd thought about that years ago, anticipated something like this, we could have provided for that to sort of ease the transition from residential to industrial use. But unfortunately, that doesn't apply here.
Mm-hmm.
It would be a good idea, and maybe sometime in the future we'll find a reason to do something like that. But right now, the situation is kind of as you stated in terms of what it's zoned for on the two sides of the road.
No. I have to disagree with this, Dave. Our bylaw doesn't say industrial use, fine. It says industrial use with special permit. And special permit must consider compatibility. I think back when this bylaw was written, you couldn't possibly figure out all the places where there might be issues and how to do buffering or any of that. What they did do, and what we've done in many of our zoning items, in the matrix, is to say special permit, leaving it as a flexible way to look at these questions. And I think that's an important part of people needing to understand how our bylaws are designed and work. You can't possibly ever figure out all and put it all in the book, how every zone comes together in every situation, as well as other issues with it. And our bylaw has been around for a long time. The town put in industrial with special permit, which includes all that list of things, as well as anything else I think that the board finds important.
All right. Any other comments or questions from the board? We do have some members of the public here who I think want to speak. And I will remind everyone that everything that has previously been said, every comment submitted by the public in writing or during a meeting is a matter of record, so we don't need to repeat that. Out of respect for everybody's time, I would ask people not to repeat things that have already been raised and put on the record. With that said, I think Mr. Shannon had his hand raised, and I've got at least 2 on Zoom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim Shannon, 237 Brigham Hill Road. I've been a resident in Grafton for over 60 years now. A couple of points. Justin, your points on the traffic, I agree with it. That there's some detail in there that should be further looked at. And I'm also concerned because we've seen other towns go through similar traffic analysis that have been completely wrong. I don't think there's a good handle on, and a good way to do that analysis at this point. Everyone that we've seen, and I think that the board has a letter from a member of the citizens group that shows 2 or 3 different towns that are running into trouble because of just that the traffic analysis was wrong. Dave, to your point, and to correct, I believe Mark, is it Mark? I'm sorry, Mr. Donahue? Okay. You had mentioned that the town of Grafton had the right to make these decisions about that property. Well, that's not quite true. That property was Air Force owned, and there were no votes taken at that time as to what it was going to be used for. The Air Force came in and said, this is our property, this is what we're going to do with it. Luckily, back then for Grafton, they decided to have the offset, what you see now, the large front yard going all the way back to the office building, and then the manufacturing facility another 100 yards beyond that. That was something that was set up with the town back in the 40s. This goes all the way back to the late 40s. So when you say that we had the opportunity to make a decision on that property, that's not 100% correct. Right now, we're depending on the board to make those decisions for us so that we don't have a problem with something right across the street from us. The point that Bob made with respect to that property being looked at as a single piece, we can't do that in all fairness to the developer and to the residents of Grafton. That property is part of the whole 190 acres. And being so, what happens on that front 26 acres has an effect, and potentially a very negative effect, on the land behind that. Now, we talked, and I asked for some information regarding the holding ponds, and I don't think I heard anything with respect to an answer or even addressing the fact as to the number of gallons that those holding ponds would be built for. Right now, we're looking at rainstorms and thunderstorms and general climatic issues that are much greater than we've ever had before. That 26 acres is going to generate 700,000 gallons of water every time we get a 1-inch rainstorm. Now, I've talked to the manager of Millbury, the manager of the town of Millbury, and he's very concerned also as to where that water is going to go. Is all that water going to go west into the Millbury area? They've got wells over there that they're very concerned about. Is all that water going to be collected? Is there going to be a brim all around that property so that all of that water goes into these holding tanks? And then my question originally was, is it going to get filtered, or is it just going to be a settling pond? The land in the back of this 26 acres, I believe, is the more toxic land. Okay, there are reports, and I had the name of it here in a minute. There was a report from 1988, I believe, that showed that there is arsenic in the property over there. I'm not sure exactly where it's located, but if you start washing out that arsenic, there's going to be a problem. It may not be a problem on the front 26 acres, but if the water from the front 26 acres is being flushed backwards, we don't know what we're flushing out. Okay, Bob, and I understand what you're saying, that we can't have all of this land tested all of the time to do this, but I think this is a very special issue here. We've got 160 acres of Grafton town property that we have to be careful with, that we have to look out for. So looking at that as just one parcel versus the whole thing, I think is the wrong way to do this. We have to do this to protect ourselves down the line, okay? Now, part two of the issue is the issue of upfront contamination and problems with the trucks. We've touched on it slightly, but I don't think we went into any detail on it with the amount of carbon monoxide and the amount of salt. Again, the salt part will go to the holding ponds and whether that's going to be filtered or not. The carbon monoxide is an air issue. That is, it's going to settle. There'll be problems with that settling, but it's going to be primarily an air issue. There is going to be a stink. When you get off the Mass Pike and take a right-hand turn, you're going to know that you're coming into Grafton. This is a quality of life issue, gentlemen. Bob, I agree with what you're saying, that compatibility here is a big issue. I feel sorry for the developer. I feel sorry for the amount of work and effort that they've put into this already. But compatibility here, when you look at the number of people that are going to be affected by that one thing, just the smell. Just take nothing else, take everything else off the table, and you're going to have a carbon monoxide smell 24/7. Dave, I will not go into some of the things that I had mentioned before, and I for a number of reasons. The one thing that I have talked to is a member of the high school building committee that built our $80 million high school. And I know that the water supply for that high school is coming from the Stop and Shop wells. We also have an East Street well that deals with North Grafton. This morning I was lucky enough to talk to Matt Pearson and ask him some very pointed questions about what if this back property leaches toxin materials. And he told me exactly what I didn't want to hear, that it could affect the Grafton water supply. This is not a my backyard issue. This is an issue for all of Grafton, because if that happens, you're talking about an $80 million high school that doesn't have showers, can't water the lawn, probably can't have the kids in there if you don't have water. I'm not sure how that would work. So we have to look at that also. The Bob made a comment that more and more people in Grafton are becoming aware of this, and I think that's true, Bob. But there's a lot of us that are out there talking about it. We're talking to people all over the town. I've talked to the towns around us. This morning I talked to Senator Michael Moore's office. He wanted more information. As a matter of fact, I have another meeting with him Wednesday afternoon. We've talked to the Grafton Conservation, the Grafton Health, the Grafton Water Department, and just 2 days ago I talked to the Grafton accountant. Someone had a question earlier about what this is going to cost. Actually, I believe Prabhu had a question as to what the benefit to the town was. Well, the Citizens Committee just last night had a meeting, and we did some rough counting on how many residents that, if affected by this, are going to be coming to the town accountant or the town assessor and saying, I want my tax assessing reduced. So you can see that this is already on people's mind, that they're not going to have a house worth $500,000 and pay taxes on it. If something is wrong in the neighborhood, they're going to ask that that assessed value be dropped down to 250 or 300 or 350, whatever it is. There is a negative here. And I think this is what Prabhu was referring to or leading to as to what are the pluses and minuses here. That's one of the minuses that I see that could happen very quickly. I think the big question here, gentlemen, is for the planning board. I know you have limited responsibility here, but I think the big question is, are you looking out for both the physical and the the physical health and the physical financial being of the town with this project. Because I think this could go in a number of ways, and a large number of them are bad. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I will say that if you spoke to the town manager Millbury and he had concerns, we have not received anything from him on our record, and I would love to receive a written correspondence from him or her. I don't know if it's a
It's a gentleman, and I don't have his name handy.
yeah. If you speak to him again, just
I will do that, Justin. He was concerned on a number of issues because he has residents on the western side of Millbury who are still on well water. That was number one. And number two, his secondary concern was I believe there are 3 streets that the minute you get off the Mass Pike,
Yes.
heading into Grafton, we had talked, Dave, I think you had brought up the question about if the trucks can't get into the parking lot, are they gonna be backed up? And some of these other places that we've seen that happens on a daily basis where the logistics person in the terminal can't get them in right away, so they sit on the street waiting for their turn to pull in and to get a bay or a waiting slot, however you want to put it. The manager of Millbury, his concern was that he was going to have trucks parked coming out of the Mass Pike from that position all the way down to the Millbury Grafton town line, which is, what's that, about a half a mile? With engines running and all of those neighbors there being subjected to the diesel fumes
yeah.
and noise all day long.
Yeah, I can understand that. I just think that if he does have concerns, having on our record is an extra, oomph, to so to speak, that we actually have his concerns in our written record.
I can do that. I can also have, I've talked with the people in Shrewsbury with respect to the development they have right on the other side of Flint Pond.
Yes.
They were a little concerned that they're building these gorgeous brand new apartments / condos, and they're going to have some sort of potential pollution down the road as to what's going to happen with those, because there's a large number of it. I don't know if you've ridden over there lately. There's hundreds of
I've seen
units.
those plans.
Yeah. So that to me, if we end up with hundreds of lawsuits from individuals over there or a class action, I think Praheeb's question about the financials on this, and I know Bob, you had a question on the financials on this on day one as to where this could potentially go. I think that's a little scary to me as a taxpayer. I don't want to see my taxes double because now all of a sudden I have to pay the Grafton town lawyers 3, 4, 5 times what they're making now because they're working 24/7.
Okay.
I know, Bob. It's not nice to think about.
We do have a few other people waiting to make their comments.
And I apologize for taking, that was much longer than I wanted to take, Dave, but
All
thank
right.
you for listening.
I've got several hands raised on Zoom and some others in the audience. I think I'll take one from Zoom. We'll kind of go back and forth.
We have Leanne Gagnon. Should be able to speak now.
Hello, Leanne Gagnon, 17 Maplewood Drive, North Grafton. If you could just bear with me, I have about 6 questions just written down so we can get through it quickly. First, just a comment on the pollution aspect of it. I think the public's concern is valid because this is a corrective action site. Granted, it might not be the 26 acres that are being purchased, but behind that, the EPA is involved with cleanup of toxic items. So it's hard for the public to wrap their mind around tearing up, the front portion of this property and not having it have an impact on the back portion, whether it be stormwater. I know, more qualified people than us have plans in place for this, but that is where the concern is coming from, and it's valid because it does exist. It is a EPA site. It is watched. There are people in the state that watch it. Furthermore, just a question for Mr. Bakari and Mr. Donahue. I know we talked about the benefits to the town financially. Could you speak on the home value in the area and what you anticipate happening there.
That's pretty good.
I,
Want me to respond, or you want to do it all at one time?
I'd like, it's probably best to sort of take note of the questions.
And then go on, yeah.
Yeah, and I think I'd like to make sure that everybody kind of gets their comments out there.
Sure.
And, you know,
So if we could make a note of that question. And my next question is, I'm not clear on, in the initial meeting, we discussed that we could potentially make it not a 24/7 operation through the zoning bylaws. I think I understood that correctly. And if that's the case, how does that impact the traffic if you're now congesting the 24-hour operations into a smaller time frame? So would that change the traffic study? Next question. When we talk about the left-hand turning lane, how would that take place? Are we talking about taking away the strip of land between Maplewood Drive and 122? Which would obviously drastically change our neighborhood. And lastly, I don't know if the landscape designer is here tonight. Is that Nicholas? I'm not sure.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi. Okay, so on the plans, I see on the back portion of it, there's a large amount of screening trees along the edge of the office building. It looks like it's completely filled in, and I assume that is to screen the operations of the trucks coming in and whatnot. Just to make a point, the people directly across the street of this are going to be subject to every single truck and vehicle coming and going from that facility. And we don't have a large screening process going on. We have a couple of mixed plants in the front of the building. That doesn't help us. I've said it a few times. If it goes forward, could we please contemplate a wall and screening trees on the strip of land between Maplewood and 122? I've seen this happen in Westboro with their facility, with the whole Bay State Commons. They did screen it properly and appropriately for the neighborhoods that are close by. So if we could just address some of those, thank you.
okay, what do you think? Should I try to get all the questions on the table and then we can go through some answers? I'd kind of like to make sure that everybody gets their questions asked. And some of the answers we maybe can give tonight, but a lot of the answers I suspect will require some study. And so rather than taking a lot of time to try to answer them, I want to make sure all the questions are on the table. So thank you, Leanne. There was a hand up in the room here.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Farley Nashaney, and I'm at 6 Donahue Lane. So I don't have a question, more of a concern. So I haven't really seen it in any of the public comments addressed, but I know that on Wyman there is substantial contamination. I know you brought up the asbestos, but there's also 167 cubic yards of solid magnesium thorium waste buried on the site. And so while it's not on the site where the warehouse is going to be, there may be possibility of disturbing that. There's 25 of them. They're 3 feet wide, 6 foot long, no, 6 foot deep, 25 foot long. And magnesium thorium is radioactive. So I just want to make sure everyone is aware of that. And I don't know if there's a way to even confirm that that's not going to be disturbed, because I know Wyman is going to have to be changing, their easements, and you're going to have to build a guard shack, and there's a lot of stuff that Wyman has to do if this is built. So I just wanted to bring that up. I'll be quick so everyone else can get their questions in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Back to Zoom, Chris Lacasse. Or Lacassi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Chris Lacasse from 19 Maplewood Drive. My first comment is in regard to the traffic study, and what I'm concerned about primarily is upstream and downstream impact from the additional traffic. First intersection that I'm concerned about is Bridge Street. So Bridge Street, for anyone who's driven through there, knows that it is a bottleneck. And frequently there are trucks that take that route. And when they take that route, they don't fit. They actually have problems actually getting through, and it causes you to have to move your car to get out of the way. I'm concerned about a route of traffic from this site up 140 to Route 9 and other areas going north, that they may actually take that route. And so the traffic study should take into account likely routes through Grafton away from that site, or to that site. So Bridge Street is one concern. And then an example also of something else I'm concerned about is sort of the way that truck drivers operate is sort of inherently incompatible with residential and commuter traffic, because they operate without much concern for the traffic around them. And the example I'll give is pretty close to that Bridge Street intersection is the Waterville Railroad crossing. I get stuck at that intersection for 20 minutes a day because the trains decide when they're going to stop traffic with no concern for the traffic. What I'm concerned about with this new site is tractor trailers pulling out onto the main road whenever they feel like it, without a concern for where traffic is, where it's backed up. So first point is, I think the traffic study needs to be expanded to look at the Mass Pike entrance, and it needs to look at other intersections like the Bridge Street intersection. And we also need to consider the fact that this could cause a real problem. And even though this isn't looked at, I saw in the traffic study, it wasn't concerned of like a high accident rate. This could significantly increase the accident rate and and reduce the safety of this area. A third point that I have is I've heard multiple times on these meetings that this warehouse would be expected to operate with a lower number of employees and require less parking spaces due to the automation and the advancements within warehouses. I personally have worked for over 2 years in Amazon Robotics, building industrial automation and robotics in warehouse facilities. And I can tell you, in my experience, that does not reduce the number of employees. It just augments the number of employees. So the automation is intended to increase efficiency. And increased efficiency results in more trucks, more volume going through the site, and the same number of employees. Maybe there's a slight reduction in employees if you have a lot of the square footage taken up with, large automation. But for the most part, you still need a full staff. You still need all the warehouse employees. And these sites operate with a much higher bandwidth of inputs and outputs, and that's going to increase the traffic in the area. It's going to maximize the amount of truck traffic that is coming and going from this site. And my last point, and I'll wrap it up so that someone else can speak next, but my last point is, I think the board is faced with this decision, not because the board has within its purview the ability to block the project for whatever reason they feel like. The board is here because there are specific exemptions being requested that really what I think we've determined after all these meetings is the town has no reason to grant an exception for the height ordinance or for the parking situation. And what I'd really love to see in this situation is, as others have said, a real close look at the compatibility issue. Everyone, all of us living across the street from this site are very concerned that, and we feel that it is incompatible with the area that we're living in, and it is going to be directly in front of our faces. It's going to block out the sun in the middle of the day. That's it.
Thank you, Chris. Back to the room here. I've got a hand raised.
My name is Wilfred Fairbanks. I live at 4 Dunhill Lane. One of the things that Chris brought up about the traffic at Bridge Street, it really starts at the Worcester line. Worcester-Millbury line goes all the way down to Lake Ave. It's just approximately 4 miles. Just the other day, I tried to get out of my street to make a left turn. I waited for the traffic from the south. Once that stopped, I had to wait for the traffic from the north. Once that stopped, I had to wait for the traffic from the south. This went on for about 2 or 3 minutes. That is what happens when you try to make a left-hand turn in that area. And that's all the way from at least the Mass Pike all the way down to Lake Ripple. That's one thing. Would like the board maybe to take this under consideration. Another thing that has never really been brought up, but the plans that I saw made by the engineering company calls for 70 bays, truck bays, which means they're anticipating at least 70 trucks are going to be able to back into this warehouse. That they say it's not going to be an Amazon, but it must be going to be something similar. Plus, there's supposed to be a spot for 76 storage trailers, which is a lot. So that's never been brought up at any time. My third thing is, when we have these meetings like this, and the planning board puts together their synopsis, so to speak, is this directed to the DOT, what the people think, or is it just what the engineering company is giving to the DOT? And that's the end of my questions.
Thank you. All right, back to Zoom. Next on my list is Rosemary Belanger.
Good evening, Rosemary Belanger, 10 Fairlawn Street. As Jim said, we are a groundswell of community negativism about this project. There is a groundswell that Bob mentioned, and the more we learn about this project, the worse it becomes. One of my comments is about the diesel truck emissions. Who will be liable for the diesel truck emissions that get onto the ground, get into the water, and potentially pollute our wells and our ponds? That's one question. The other is the stormwater drainage. I mean, I'm a layperson, so I wasn't able to follow along with all of the terminology, but I'd like to know where the drainage pipes are vis-a-vis the vegetation that was placed over in the plans, that was placed over the drainage pipes. Where on the site is that? And how is the stormwater going to be managed? What are the treatments for winter? Are they salt and sand? What is in those mixtures? Because there's going to be runoff, and we're concerned about that. I'm very happy that Prabhu mentioned the truck traffic. I also did not see any indication of truck traffic either in the original study or in the MDM study. So I'm happy that we're going to be accounting for that. My other question is for the developer. We've all seen the marketing material, and we did ask this question back in September, how you were marketing the building. Now we certainly know. One of the questions that I have is why a warehouse, given the incompatibility with the dense neighborhoods? And there are several neighborhoods that will be impacted. As we know, diesel emissions travel 2 to 3 to 4 football field lengths. So this is going to affect Millbury, as Jim said, Shrewsbury, and most of Grafton, not to mention the truck traffic. We were talking last night about Amazon Prime trucks, and they're moving at quite a rapid rate on 122. I can see them from Fairlawn Street. We think that they're probably cutting through to get to the facility in Northborough because they don't want to get on 495. So this is a harbinger of things to come. I think the other thing is you know, the cost of town, not only the hundreds of abatements that are going to be requested from all the abutters and those impacted by the project, but, you know, if the sediment gets into the water, does that become a town issue, that the town needs to clean up the wells and the water? You know, so I think that given that the developer has multiple uses for the building in the marketing material, I would have to ask, why did they settle on a warehouse, which is creating a lot of problems, not only for the community, but for the town? So I would challenge the developer to look at why a warehouse when it could be a manufacturing facility, it could be an office building, it could be high tech, it could be anything. Given that they're saying, oh, we're just throwing it out to see what the interest is, my question is, why a warehouse? So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Do I have any other hands up in the room? Not at the moment. Next hand on Zoom is Bella Thornton.
Hi, I have two quick questions. My first question, or I guess it's more of a comment, is I was reading briefly through the zoning bylaws, and I know this isn't the zoning committee, but both the zoning areas of office and light industry as well as industrial, both specifically state the overriding goal is to protect the town's groundwater resources. I just thought that was kind of an interesting comment. I don't know much about zoning terminology, but I thought that was an important thing to mention. My other comment, I guess, is through like a quick Google search, you can see that one fully loaded 18-wheeler driving on the roads can equate to 9,600 cars just on like the wear and tear of the pavement and stuff. I don't know if that's accurate, but when mentioning the Amazon trucks driving through different parts of town just to get to the facility in Northborough, I just didn't know if that was something that we had considered through other parts of town, such as like Bridge Street and North Street and things like that, where these tractor trailers might be driving and wearing down on our roads that aren't government or like state roads.
Okay, is that it? And we'll try to, as I said before, we're trying to get all the questions and comments listed, make sure everybody has had a chance to have their say, and then we'll see, you know, some of the answers we may be able to give tonight. Others will, you know, they'll go back, or whoever will try to get answers. I'd rather take the time to get good answers and try to answer anything off the cuff. Did you have anything else, Bella?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Still nobody else from the room? Okay, we got one more hand raised on Zoom. Amy Thornton.
Hi, my name is Amy Thornton. I'm at 15 Maplewood, which is directly across from the proposed distribution center. And I do have a couple of questions, but I just wanted to make a point on the traffic, obviously. Between the town line and where the post office is, which maybe it's a mile, maybe a little bit more. I counted today, there are 9 roads and more than 23 businesses in that stretch of road. So it's impossible to me to think that adding a distribution center is not going to be a detriment to that road. This weekend, there were 2 accidents in front of Cumberland Farms, one that was quite serious. So I know we don't want to repeat ourselves, but that's how compact this road is here. My next question is, I know it's been spoken about traffic assessments. And 6 months after this project is built and then a traffic study is done and it's a disaster, we're stuck with it. So I just don't, I understand why those are done, but it just doesn't make much sense to me after the fact. This is a state road, and I don't know how quickly the state moves on things, but I can't imagine that it's that fast. So if there are modifications that need to be made, it doesn't seem like that will be something that we're going to be able to do very quickly. My next question, and this is like a procedural question, I guess for the planning board, it had been said earlier that you're not, you don't take into account, and I'm saying this wrong, but you don't take into account the benefit to the town in your decision. And I don't understand that. I'm not into town politics, but I just was wondering if maybe somebody could explain that to me. And my last point is, Prabhu had said the cost to the town. And since we don't know who the customers are, and as we know, it's been advertised many different companies to come and do their business here, every time there's an issue with bad traffic or noise or pollution, we're not going to contact the builder or the owner of the, we're going to contact the town. And I can't imagine that there aren't going to be any issues moving forward. So I know in Milford, they had this problem and they had multiple tenants. And every time there was a traffic problem, they had to track down those tenants. I just think that it goes beyond, in a way, the compatibility issue. Obviously, it's not compatible with this stretch of road, but I just feel like, you know, there's a lot of things to think of. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the room? I don't see at this point any more hands raised on Zoom, other than the three of the folks who have talked still have their hands raised.
I don't know. I can't lower those hands, but if they
No, they have to voluntarily lower the hands. Okay.
I will briefly say just two things that stuck out to me on the questions that I wanted to say is on the compatibility issue, one thing that I will be thinking of, and I suggest people both in favor and not in favor of this project think about, because I'm not sure where I settle on that yet myself, is what types of industrial uses would be compatible with the neighborhood in this location, and what types would not. That would be, in your minds, worse than a warehouse. And that's just something I wanted to say that I think is worth thinking about, and I will be doing the same.
That are worse than the warehouse?
Correct. Worse than the warehouse. That just to kind of find out where a warehouse fits on that scale of compatibility, and you know what could go here. The second point I just wanted to say that stuck out to me is, you know, basically who is responsible for, you know, emissions from the diesel vehicles, and that as far as how it would affect the, you know, mitigations on the roads and things like that. To me, just the idea of emissions from vehicles that can legally drive in the state, that comes down to the emission standards that the state and federal government set that get checked every time these vehicles are inspected. And I think that is, you know, kind of where I stand on that. And I just wanted to express that.
All right, did you have anything you wanted to chip in at this point, Chris?
Yeah, just a couple quick things. In terms of the vehicle emissions, commercial vehicle emissions are regulated at the state level by the RMV, and the Department of Environmental Protection, DEP. So that's the authority that would have that purview. And then again, just in terms of the environmental contamination that was discussed, and would be part of the 21E as discussed. So from our understanding, this is a clean site, and in terms of the project, you know, we're just looking at this project site. They wouldn't, any other disturbance off of this project site would be a separate process through the planning board or through the relevant authorities, can measure it with whatever off-site kind of projects are being proposed. And then in terms of the stormwater, I just wanted to touch base. There's been a lot of discussion on that, and there is a stormwater report that was produced, designed by engineers for this project. It was peer reviewed, and just looking back at that report, it does state that the total runoff from the property for the 1, 2, 10-year, 25-year, and 100-year storms, which are a way of measuring severity of storms, will be reduced. In terms of discharge, it actually is proposing to rectify an existing pipe that discharges unfiltered water into wetlands, and will revert that. Again, I'm not a stormwater engineer, so I would just encourage residents to look through that report to get educated on that in terms of the stormwater discharge and stormwater that's been designed for the site. And again, that's been designed by engineers and peer reviewed by the town's engineers, so I defer to them in terms of any additional specifics, but that is included in the report. So.
Yep, and just to build on that, we as a board will want to satisfy ourselves that this site, the development on this site will not have adverse impacts off-site in terms of stormwater runoff. As just we'll be reviewing the stormwater reports and the peer reviews to make sure that they're all in agreement that, in fact, if anything, the discharge of water from this site will be reduced and not increased. That said, Attorney Donahue, did you want to remark on anything that you've heard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me thank the members of the audience for their comments. I do think they fall into some categories. Mr. McGoldrick already touched on some of those. The impact from the development itself as to how it may impact surrounding properties or surrounding communities is governed almost exclusively by the issue of stormwater. And we went through in September, as part of our initial presentation, a review of how stormwater is being attenuated in this case, the steps being taken to meet the requirements of the DEP for removal of suspended solids, the oil and gas separators that are part of the plan, and any other number of steps. And those were reviewed by Graves. And I would assume that we can at some point come back and do a summary of that again as far as that. But suffice it to say that the stormwater concerns of this development, I think, can be met by regularly applied standards that you've seen in other projects of this town that create additional impervious area. The environmental issues, much like Mr. McGoldrick just indicated, I think we have to stop talking about it, quite candidly. This site is, as you heard from Mr. Bakari, who's going to put his own reputation and financial wherewithal on the line if he buys the site, is what in the vernacular would be a clean site. Whatever's around it is somebody else's problem. And if it doesn't comply with law today, then steps should be taken to require it to come into law today. If it complies, then it complies. But this development can't be weighed down by what its neighbor essentially is doing on its property in some fashion. And it's really not appropriate for this standard here. The traffic, as we talked about before, is an important point. The question was asked with regard to the potential of a left-hand turn and the impacts of that. Recall that I said that we just really started thinking about that, so this is very early. But whatever type of widening or configuration would need to occur with that would need to occur either on our land, Wyman Gordon's land, or within the existing public way. So it would not involve the taking of any additional private property in any fashion. But once again, we'll be talking about that at a future meeting when we know more about it. Mr. Lacasa's comments with regard to Bridge Street and the truck traffic is appreciated. We'll take a look at that and be able to weigh in with regard to that and be able to do that in some fashion. In talking about maybe a more macro, the question was asked, I think, by Ms. Belanger is why here and why a warehouse. We talked about that in our initial filing. We talked about it in our initial presentation to you. This site is a uniquely appropriate site for a warehouse facility because of its proximity to the interchange with the Mass Turnpike. The logistics industry is an expanding industry in the Northeast due to demands from a number of different sources and a number of different geo-economic forces that are at play. That's what the appropriate use lies to. On the issue of compatibility, we see it as compatible with the uniqueness of this area that we talked about early this evening across from an established residential neighborhood. And the reason we do is that because of the magnitude and the impacts of a warehouse can be better measured, can be better confined than a similar type of industrial use that would involve industrial activities, which would change over time, expand, contract, meet whatever standards are at that time, would be clearly generating additional noise, additional glare, and additional other impacts that emanate from an industrial area. The board members already mentioned, and Mr. McGoldrick mentioned, the concept that somehow this development should be based upon whether the diesel truck emissions, any industrial use of that property is going to involve diesel trucks coming to and from the site and passenger vehicles going to and from the site in a greater quantity than they are now. There's no issue of that. And so it's a matter of whether this is an appropriate use, which we think it is in some fashion. I think that's what I had really for the comments I had. And as I said, we'll obviously be providing much more detailed responses in the future. Thank you.
Yes, it's certainly fair to say that we don't yet have all of the relevant traffic and up-to-date traffic information that we will ultimately want.
That's correct.
Yeah, so we are expecting considerable additional traffic information, and as such, as I said before, I hesitate to comment very much on the traffic right now since so much of that's still up in the air.
Thank you.
But thank you for that. Anybody else from the board want to say anything further?
Yeah, a little bit.
Bob.
Okay. As you said, Dave, I've been holding back on the traffic question because I want to see a complete traffic study and review. And right now we don't know a lot about what that's going to show. The traffic studies always show that it's okay. I mentioned that before. So we'll have to see how it manages to show that in this case. Make some sort of judgment about what's being said there. Because people don't know how to go out and engineer roads. So they just go on what they see as they drive along. On the traffic study, though, Bridge Street is a good point.
Mm-hmm.
A left turn into it is going to be a mess. Heading away from this site, a left turn onto the western end of Bridge Street is going to be a problem. But then, as we know, the intersection with North Main Street at the other end is very restricted. It has a serious geometric problem. And I want to be sure that this traffic studying looks at the geometry and the situation there, as well as giving us as good an idea as possible of how much of what kind of traffic this project is going to put on that intersection. Turns out that intersection is very difficult to make better, but it's the way to a lot of places other than the turnpike. So I think some information on that will be helpful. There was a mention of an initial stormwater presentation. Am I forgetting something, or was that maybe for conservation? I don't remember seeing anything of any real depth at all. And the other thing is, we keep talking about compare this to other industrial uses. the name of the zone is industrial, but you need to look through our matrix, zoning matrix, and see all of the things that are allowed there. It doesn't have to be heavy industry. It's just the name of that zone, which allows heavy stuff. It allows Wyman Gordon to be there, but there are probably a lot of uses that might not be that sort of heavy industry uses, that between the zoning and the overlays and whatnot could be possible there. Okay.
Anything else from the board? I think we have a couple of additional public comments waiting. Let me start with Rosemary Boulanger, whose hand has been raised for a while. I don't know if Rosemary has something more that she wants to add at this point. If not,
she may, hold on. I'm just,
Oh, here we go.
there we go.
I'm all set, but thank you so much. I'm sorry that my hand has been raised all this time.
Okay, thank you. No problem. All right. I think Mr. Shannon had his hand raised a moment ago.
I take exception, Jim Shannon, I'm sorry, 237 Brigham Hill. I take exception to the wording by Mr. Donahue with respect to this being a regular real estate evaluation. There's nothing regular about this evaluation from day one. I understand that he wants to keep it very simple so that the smoke and mirrors can be pulled over our eyes. This is not a regular or a very simple evaluation. That's why it's been going on as long as it is. So I want to just go on the record as taking exception, and I know what you're up against because of the detail and the fact involved on this. So that was, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, next up, Bella Thornton has her hand raised on Zoom.
Hi, live on 15 Maplewood Drive. I didn't mention that previously, but so a lot of, or most of this, all of these meetings have talked about why this would be incompatible to the neighborhood, but there hasn't really been anything saying why it would be compatible. Oftentimes people are quick to say the revenue would be the reason, but there really hasn't been any talk of that or what benefits the town would get financially from this. I don't know if that has been something that's been determined or if that is something that we could look into more, or if there's a different committee that we would have to seek that answer from.
Yeah, we did briefly discuss earlier the question of thinking about this, thinking about the cost benefit trade-off and the extent to which we can take that into consideration when the board ends up making a decision on this. But we didn't answer. We just sort of raised. We said we'd think about it and then try to see what we could do. And the more general question of compatibility, there's a lot of ways to look at that. And ultimately, this board will decide what we think about compatibility.
Real quick, is that something, when you talk about like financial revenue, is that something that you try to find the answer to before you would make the decision of approving this, or is that something that gets figured out afterwards?
It's hard to say at this point. A lot of the details of costs and benefits are not going to be easy to nail down in any kind of a quantifiable manner. Given a lot of the uncertainties, partly we don't yet know who the tenant is going to be, and what kind of operation they'll have. We don't know how the operation might evolve over the years, and there's just it sounds like a simple idea, but I think when it comes right down to it, it's not going to be so easy to make any clear statements about costs and benefits. We'll see what we can come up with though. Bob, I think you want to speak to that?
Yeah, just sort of tried to say it before, but maybe we could get. No one's going to tell us if the town's going to get $713,000 a year in taxes, but maybe someone can give for the for the scope, for the range of possibilities that's gonna be there, what sort of, benefits, taxes mostly, I guess, can the town, look to? It might be a range of 3 to 1 in numbers, but I wanna know how many digits there are.
Yeah, I think it's sufficient to say right now that we will keep this in mind and we'll see what we can come up with. Anything else,
you.
Bella?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think Amy has her hand raised again. Amy Thornton, did you have something to?
Yeah, I did. Thank you. I just had a question and a comment. The attorney had said, and I understand that the front of the property is clean and they can guarantee us that nothing's going to happen on the back of the property. And he said that if it does, it's not his problem, but what it is our problem, the people that live here. So I just wanted to comment that. The next question, and this is a website question, I want to upload some pictures that I've taken of the traffic out front. There was one day in November that the traffic was bumper to bumper for 40 minutes. And so I took pictures to document that, and I'm having a hard time uploading them. So I don't know if I should just email them to the planning board or if there's another way that I could get those to you.
You can email, so you won't be able to upload them to the website, but you can email them to the planning, DEPT, planning department.
Okay.
At grafton-ma.gov, and we will add them to the exhibits page for you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Anything else, Amy? Thank you.
No, that's good. Thank you.
All right, and Chris Lacasse?
Hi, this is actually Heather Lacasse from 19 Maplewood Drive. I just had a quick question regarding the height ordinance and the exception that's being requested, because that is, something that they are looking to build that is outside of our current bylaws and would require an exemption to be made. And I'm wondering if there's any precedent within the town of granting an exception to the height ordinance, and if so, where in town is that, and what is it in terms of its proximity to residences and houses? So in looking at the compatibility and having, some of the biggest or one of the biggest buildings that's going to be in town across from, single story family homes. I'm just wondering what the precedent has been in town, and where is there an area that we could look to that has some buildings that have been granted the exception.
So I just want to clarify the what's being referred to as the exception. It's a waiver request by the applicant. I don't have the specific section in front of me, but it is within the bylaw, so it is within the board's authority delegated to the planning board in their review to consider and either grant or deny the waiver request to go up to 50 feet. And so the applicant in this case has even further reduced the height requirements in the most recent revision, but it still triggers the need for this waiver request. So it is within the board's discretion and in the bylaws. There hasn't been a determination yet on that, and in terms of precedent, I'm not aware of any past projects in town. I'll defer to some of the boards if they may have more background on that. I see Bob raising his hand.
The one example that comes to my mind is the high school. The roof of the high school auditorium is, I believe, 66 feet.
The stage house.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, the other case that I think we did have to grant an exception or a waiver is up at the end of the road in Centec Park. the place that does fiber optics.
That tower.
They have they had to have a tower of a certain height because I guess they draw down or whatever one does with the glass.
Yep.
But that's also nowhere near anybody else.
Right. Yeah, I don't know that there are any really, any easily accessible examples that are comparable to this building. Just off the top of my head, I couldn't say. Okay.
There are some buildings in town that are fairly.
I have another hand raised on Zoom from Jason Nishanian.
Hear me? We can.
Yep.
One thing that you guys touched upon, but I think it got overlooked a little bit, was the trucks and their emissions. Was each individual truck will pass an emissions, but if you put 70 in the same spot, we're talking about a different story. Everyone loves cats, but if you put 70 cats in a house, now the house becomes unlivable. So you put 70 trucks or more, plus the cars, in a small area, that emissions it might pass individually, but as a whole, it's going to directly affect much larger than each truck itself. And I think that got overlooked because they talked about, the trucks will, each have to pass the standards and et cetera, but you're grouping them, you're corralling 70 plus the employees' cars in a much smaller area than it ever has been. So for the public, that's a concern, because now it's not just one truck passing emissions, it's 76 trucks. What's the air quality going to be then? And that was my only question.
Okay, thank you. And one more hand raised on Zoom, and that would be Edward Prisby.
Hi, Edward Prisby, 25 Danielle Drive. Thanks for giving me a second. I just wanted to make the point about the traffic. First of all, obviously we don't have a traffic study done. And yes, Bob, most of them do say that the traffic will be okay, but in the absence of countervailing evidence to the contrary, you do have to take the reports with the expertise with which they're written. And to be honest with you, I spent some time on the planning board and we review traffic studies. And the reason the ones that I reviewed said they're okay is because generally speaking, they're okay. If you view traffic subjectively, which is, if you've lived in town for a number of years and traffic keeps increasing, then you're going to say, well, the traffic study was wrong. Well, no, it's not. Traffic studies aren't crystal balls, but they're generally speaking geared toward determining what the immediate and reasonably long-term impacts of traffic are going to be in a given area. But I will say this, to the extent that you want to expand the scope of the traffic project down towards Bridge Street and down on the intersection of, 122, 140 down there, I think this is where the town requires a little bit of leadership, because we, as you know, have been in communication with the railroad about revamping that intersection over there. And one of the reasons why that hardly ever gets any traction is because when you want to go make a change in that neighborhood, that conference room that Dave and Justin are sitting in fills up with people from that neighborhood. And so when you get to a point where you have an entire town that says they want economic development, but you've got pockets of the town resisting the changes necessary to give the development that the town needs. So this is where the planning board and the planning department and the select board kind of need to pick their poison and need to be willing to be unpopular with some people and say, look, something's got to give here. Because the people in the room are right. The traffic on Bridge Street in the morning is ridiculous. I would rue the day that I had to get a morning commute going through that direction in town. But by the same token, Mark Donohue's not wrong. The Worcester Street location is a priority development. It's a priority development for a reason. And it's not as though nothing can go there. So it's going to be this, or it's going to be something else, or it's going to be this in another form, but it's going to be something. And we're all going to have to live with the changes that come with it, I suspect. But, you know, to the extent that there's additional information or additional help that can be lent from other boards in leadership in this town, you know, I would agree with you, Bob. I haven't heard a lot from the select board about how they feel about this particular project. People obviously have questions about revenue coming in. You know, everybody does the logical thing, which is the cost benefit analysis. Okay, how much traffic do I have to put up with? And how much inconvenience and site pollution do I have to put up with versus how much benefit? Now, it's that people don't realize it's not your job to consider the benefit. Your job is to consider the land use. Can a private party do what they want with their own land? That's the role of the planning board. Conversely, the select board's job is to determine, okay, what's the direction of the town and what processes can we implement to best affect economic growth? And if people have questions about what the economic impact is going to be in terms of additional income, and I'm talking about new growth and additional property taxes that are going to be counted above and beyond Proposition 2.5 to relieve local real estate impacts, then that should be an endeavor down the hall in Evan Broussard's office and the assessor's office. You know, they can work with you guys on this. All you have to do is ask. And it's been my observation over the years that one of the problems that Grafton has is it exists in certain silos. The planning board has its job, and the town administrator's office has its job, and the select board has its job. But really, if you want to get something like this done, you got to work in partnership. So the things like the numbers and the things like future considerations of traffic plans really have to be discussed together in a group setting to see what can get done. Because otherwise, you're just going back and forth between two unhappy neighborhoods, and then nothing happens. So that's it.
Thank you, Ed. Anything else at this point?
One thing, Dave, mention of the diesel fumes. I don't remember whether we know what the situation will be with trucks continuing to run their engines when they're in this facility. You know, a lot of times I know, at least out on the roads and on the pull-off areas and whatnot, they sit with their engines running pretty much forever. I don't know how they, you know, seems expensive, but I guess it's hard to get diesel engines started or something like that. So anyway, I'm interested in whatever input we can get about how that's going to work out. And I guess this is too soon to be looking for electric trucks.
Yeah, electric trucks are under development. I read about them occasionally, but they're not exactly common as of yet. To understate the matter just a bit.
Will they be able to automatically turn in, you know, on their driverless autopilot?
Yeah, well, now you can imagine all these fully controlled, autonomous trucks. They'll be able to manage their trips from beginning to end so that they will never have to be crowding on the roads.
Oh, yeah.
You know, just in time arrival at the site. I
think I'll be gone before that.
But
yeah.
I'm not holding my breath. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's probably worth keeping in mind, though, Bob, the point you're raising about to what extent can we take into account any information about the impact of the trucks on site. However much information may be available, and to whatever extent we can legally take that into consideration.
I would think that you could have a condition saying trucks can't idle, or probably that's a little strong, but you see what I mean?
Yeah.
You could.
Chris?
I was raising my hand more in terms of the electric trucks out of my own curiosity, and I can look into if there's precedence of conditions in terms of idling, but out of my own curiosity, I did look at if there's other communities that have restricted these types of facilities to electric trucks. I believe there was one in in California, which may or may not be commensurate with this project here. But there was the article that I came across indicated pros and cons to the community in terms of restricting that, and that was done through a tax increment financing, which is completely separate from this. But just anecdotally, I did take a little bit of a look at that. I'm happy to look into conditions in terms of the idling and if there's precedent as these facilities come online in Massachusetts, and if there's comparable things for the board to consider.
And how our applicants feel about it.
Yes.
And how that would impact their operation.
Attorney Donahue.
Let me try to cut the corner on this some fashion. We'll provide to you a written report, for lack of a better term, as to what we would see in the industry for a warehouse as far as idling practices, because I assume it's relatively an industry practice. So we'll get you that,
That would
and
be
then we can go
interesting.
from there as to how we either condition or something else. So we'll get it for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I still see 4 of our Zoom attendees have their hands raised. I'd ask you if you could lower your hands and unless there's something more you want to say.
I believe Leanne Gagnon has newly raised her hand.
Okay, Leanne?
Hi, Leanne Gagnon, 17 Maplewood Drive. Just a couple of things. I didn't hear anybody touch on the property values in the area. I did ask Attorney Donahue to perhaps speak on that with his experience in this area. Also, he spoke about what could potentially become of that if not this, that there will always be trucks coming and going with any other business. So like my question is, what are you going to do to buffer the neighborhoods near here? Because maybe there is another business that could come in and might have better ideas to help protect the neighborhoods in this area with more vegetation, more screening from the sounds, the pollution. Even trees can suck in some of that diesel pollution and not have it spread to all the areas around here. And then you spoke about not taking private land for the left-hand turning lane. That's not what I'm speaking about. I'm speaking about the state-owned property that is the strip of land between Maplewood Drive and 122. And are there any plans to put some buffering or screening on that strip? And also, I don't think Nicholas Campanelli touched about the screening in the back of the warehouse. Thank you for your time.
Thank
Any
you.
board members.
You want to wait, do all these one more time at the end, Mr. Chairman, or you want me to try to respond to the question?
Now, at this point, if there's something you can respond to right now, please do.
As to the question of land values, it would only be my own personal opinion that it won't have any impact. Grafton's a very desirable community. We expect that it will continue to be a desirable community in some fashion. On the issue of reducing impacts, I think we have been responsive. I think our original plan was responsive. Mr. Campanelli reviewed with you before the creation of the berm along Worcester Street. The additional plantings beyond that, the concept of additional and beyond that is something that's fair. If the board wants to do peer review of the landscape with a landscape architect, or we can do that. We're glad to continue to hear how we can try to reduce in a logical fashion that works for the development some of the impacts that people see. But we think we've already been trying to be responsive through a couple of different iterations. So.
Yeah, I'd like for people watching for this list of people we have and everyone else out there to let us know if there are mitigations that they think would be helpful. Is that clear?
Yeah,
let's say we can't say no, or we don't say no, but we have this and this and this that are being done that are reasonable and practical things to do. I think that input would be very helpful. You can do it through the website or letters to us or coming to our meeting. But if you do it up soon, then they'll have a chance to look at it before the next time we get together.
we've heard at least one suggestion tonight already, and yes, more would be welcome. I have another hand raised on Zoom, Sandy Nelson.
Sandy Nelson?
Sandy seems to be still on mute.
Am I unmuted?
Yep.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, I apologize for that. I didn't even realize I'm talking away. My name is Sandy Nelson. I live at 13 Maplewood Drive. I just wanted to make a comment regarding Attorney Donahue's comment about property values. I would beg to disagree. On one topic, I agree. Grafton is a very desirable town to live in. But in terms of property value, I would see it plummeting. I don't foresee anything desirable about living across the street from a 375,000 square foot building with 74, 76 truck bays, traffic, trailer truck. The traffic, in my mind, I mean, I live on 122. And as it is right now, there's quite a bit of traffic, commuter traffic. And particularly there was a comment about Bridge Street. That's, everybody knows who has to go down that area. It's very congested, but I am very concerned about all the points that people have brought up tonight, which are very valid. Pollution, one in particular, the idling of the trucks, because there is really no good way to take a left turn onto the property while there's traffic just sitting and waiting. You know, I just don't foresee the traffic is just going to be terrible. And I do believe that is going to bring down the property value of many of the houses in this particular area. So I would certainly disagree with that comment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. I've got a hand raised here in the room. I think we may be approaching the limit of what our seats can endure.
Hello, I'm Helen Fairbanks. I live at 4 Donahue Lane in North Grafton. I was in this room, I think about a year and a half ago, where we had this planning board meeting discussing a piece of property that lies between Cumberland Farms and a new auto body shop there that used to be Rogers Auto Body, where Campanelli's restaurant was and Charlie Bolak's place was. And we had this whole discussion about what was going to be built there and how it was open for apartments and for businesses and so on and so forth. And I'm sure you're aware, you've probably had discussions with people that are planning to build there or want to build there. My question is, has anybody taken that into consideration when you're doing this traffic analysis for businesses that you anticipate but have not materialized yet? Thank you. I'd appreciate your answer.
I think the answer is there's really no feasible way to take that into consideration because
Well, that's rather like saying that you get married and there's no feasible way to anticipate you're going to get pregnant, but you do know you're going to get pregnant at some point because you want to have children. So you have a big empty lot there, sir, and you know you're going to try and put businesses in there. I would think anticipation would be part of it. Yes?
I think, generally speaking, a traffic engineer could speak to this with somewhat more authority, but that we basically can only put numbers to things that are measurable.
Yes, correct. But you, as the planning board, can anticipate that those figures are not going to be complete. They're not going to be complete if they're done now, if that building is going to be built in a year or two. You have to look forward, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yes,
a traffic study's supposed to consider future development in the area, isn't it? And I don't remember seeing what was said about that, but Bolac Plaza, something will happen to Bolac Plaza here in the next few years, and it ought to be, figured in the projections.
Thank you, Bob.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, Scott Thornton with Vanessa Associates.
Yes.
Yeah, so we do, you're right, and Mr. Hassinger is right. We do research with the town to determine what projects are approved and not yet built or under construction, not yet occupied, to identify what specific developments could add traffic into road conditions by the time the project is fully occupied, which in this case, we look at a 7-year projection. And we checked in with both Millbury and with Grafton, and there was one project that was identified. I don't think this specific site was identified, but that's most likely because nothing has been proposed yet, and there's a range of different alternatives that could likely be developed there. And so, we take into account the projects that we know about, and also we include a background traffic growth rate to account for just general traffic growth and increases in the area. So that is included in the future condition.
Yes, I might observe that the purpose of the traffic analysis for this project is to attempt to quantify the impact of this project on the traffic. In this case, in the traffic 7 years from now, the future build scenario.
Correct.
And the observation is that if other things happen to increase the traffic on the road, then the impact of this project is actually reduced.
That's
as a
correct.
percentage of the total traffic. Because this project is projected to add X number of vehicle trips per day on that road. And other projects adding to the traffic on that road doesn't change the traffic that this project puts into the mix. But on a larger baseline of traffic with additional developments, the percentage impact of this project goes down. So actually, I think it's fair to say, Scott, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but by not including speculative projects or future potential projects in the traffic analysis, we are, if anything, overestimating the impact of this project on the traffic from that point of view.
Yeah, I would say from that point of view, it's a relative, you're looking at relative increases, and if your baseline does not increase that much, then the impact of this specific project would be noticeably higher. I would also say that, there's a development pipeline, and, we may not have to include that project that was referenced because nothing concrete has been identified. But when that project, or if that project moves forward, or if a development on that site moves forward, and our project is not, not to put the cart before the apple horse, but if they have to do a traffic study, they would then have to account for other developments such as this project is their background condition. And it just, it goes on and on like that.
I don't think percentages are the right thing, Dave. How many cars, and all those cars or all those trucks are there with or without the additional, I understand your point. Anyway, just, you're not aware of the Bolac Bolac Plaza, so-called, the property just beyond the Cumbies. Probably Chris can help with it. Just I suspect that you could take a quick look at that and see if, you know, maybe you can touch the base a little bit. We're holding our breath waiting for something to happen there.
The current permitting of the Bolac Plaza is permitted for demolition, but there's no proposed future use at that site at this time that the boards have reviewed. So,
Yep. I'm getting the sense that we're sort of reaching the point of diminishing returns on our discussion tonight.
And you only have 9 minutes left.
Yes, we have.
Mr. Chairman?
At this point, the board does require a motion to
I'll move that we
continue past
extend
10
the meeting
o'clock.
past 10 o'clock.
Seem to be failing for lack of a second.
We do have a few other items of business. Which if we don't do tonight, we'll have to do on December 27th.
If I might, Mr. Chairman.
Um,
We're coming back. There's no doubt about that.
Yes.
We're gonna need 3+ weeks for sure to put the data together and make it worth coming back. So we're not foreclosing all the comment. By my count, you're on about the 7th hour so far of public testimony on this project. I'm sure you're gonna take more testimony. So we're prepared to request or assent to a continuation, and everybody can start fresh sometime in the latter part of January. So.
Yes, let me make that clear to everybody that there will be additional opportunities to comment and ask questions. Besides here tonight, we're looking at probably January 10th or later. In between now and then, everyone is welcome to submit comments in writing to the board via the website or by email. You did have, there's a hand raised back there.
I had my hand up before this gentleman came up without asking. But I would just like to add one thing. Because this was brought up in one of the first meetings, that when they did the traffic study, the engineering company, they did it in March, the beginning of the pandemic, when there was less traffic, no school buses, less traffic. In the wintertime, less traffic. When are they going to do another study? Would it be during the summertime? Would it be during the spring?
Yeah.
So I think that it has to be addressed as well.
Recall that they've made some adjustments based on the fact of when the counts were done. They've made adjustments to account for the pandemic, to account for the time of year, and our peer review, MDM, has commented, has addressed that topic, and
I hate to say the state is wrong, but they added 16%. Okay, since then, traffic has increased tremendously.
so that's one of the.
So that percentage is probably null and void.
And that will be addressed in the revisions to the traffic study. That's already on the table.
Thank you.
All right, Chris.
Mr. Chairman, there's a motion on the floor for the continuation past 10 p.m., which we have not yet resolved.
Yes, I did not hear a second for that.
If the applicants are asking to continue the hearing until January 10th at 7:30, and they're going to give us a written request, then I'd move that we grant the request.
If you want to put it on your agenda for the 10th, but I will tell you now, we will not be ready to process anything further on traffic on the 10th.
All right, I'll change my motion to the 24th.
So name
What do you-
the date
what
that
date-
works
which date
for
do you
you.
want?
Yeah, the 10th is the next. The 24th is the next meeting after the 10th. Is that more comfortable for you?
It's more realistic.
Yeah.
We'll at least we got a fighting chance to be able to get you something and do something productive.
Yeah, and in fact, if you would be more comfortable within more time, we can
No, let's come on the 24th.
pick a date that works best for you.
24th is great. Thank you for your accommodation.
Okay, so I think there's a
that's my
request for
motion.
continuation in Bob's motion, and you will follow up with that and send an email to the
Tomorrow.
to
Is that
staff.
okay with you?
Just as a point of order, I'll procedurally withdraw my motion to make that.
Well, the motion died for lack of a second.
Yes, and I'll second Bob's motion.
Moved and seconded to grant the applicant's request to continue to January 24th. Discussion of the motion. Hearing none. Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
And Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. We'll see everybody back here on the 24th. And like I said, in the meantime, if you have any information you want to bring to the board's attention, send it in. And we'll go from there.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, everybody on Zoom for participating and patiently paying attention.
Good night, guys.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Louder microphones. Thank you.
Alrighty. Now, it is 9:56.
Thank you, gentlemen.
And we have a few more items of business to take care of.
I think we do have to extend the meeting at least a few minutes.
Yeah.
Sorry, but I move that we vote to extend the meeting beyond 10 o'clock.
Troublemaker.
Sorry.
Linda just moved to extend the meeting past.
Second.
Is it second? All right, moved and seconded. All those in favor, Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Reluctant aye, Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
and Dave votes
Aye.
aye. Motion carried unanimously. And back to our discussion items. We have, first item is a review of a draft budget for the planning department.
Yep, so, consistent with, some past practices, I wanted to, present the draft budget, to the planning board, looking at, what is being submitted. Again, this is just a draft version. We'll still go through, obviously, FinCom town meeting, but this is, what we'll be presenting, currently. Let me just pull up
Yeah.
the numbers.
There seem to be some changes in people, different positions or whatever. So there's some stuff going on that maybe we'll get a little background on somewhere here.
Yeah, I was going to ask explicitly about if you could touch on the changes between FY22 and FY23.
I am happy to. I'll pull up the draft budget right now. I appreciate the board extending the time so that we can review this information. So, of course, it cuts off what we want, but so for the most part, the budget is level funded with the exception of a few items. And when I say level funded, it does include a budget for, I believe, 2% increases. The majority of these are rounded slightly up to accommodate those increases in salary. In terms of larger increases that the board should note, let me just we did do a slight increase in overtime pay. So this is related to work by administrative staff, mainly in terms of meetings and work past hours. We have consistently seen this budget item go over and need to be extended. So I'm increasing a request for that amount consistent with what has been utilized in the past. We've actually probably gone over that 3,500, which is what the request is, but hopefully this will hit a mid-ground. We'll try to continue to streamline our workflows so that we are not utilizing overtime as much. But again, the existing adopted budget of 2,800 is not sufficient to cover historical costs in this line item. We do include the staff planner position, which was included in the previous budget at 20,000. We did some slight adjustments. You know, the $800 to account for that is simply in terms of calculating out pay periods at a $20 an hour rate. I do note that this may be subject to change. We are working with the town administrator's office in terms of the pay study for this, which includes this position, so we may have a more accurate number by budget time, and we may try to adjust this to accommodate that, or leave it budgeted at simply $20 an hour. But that's our estimate for now. In terms of professional and technical, there is a large increase here. I've discussed that with the town administrator's office. I'm anticipating in June to have some extended time off, approximately 12 weeks. So this is to account for the ability to fund an interim planner position. I may be coming in part-time for that, but in terms of accommodating that and making sure that we have consistent staff levels, that's what that line item is, the increase for. Conference and seminar fees are level.
Chris,
Yep.
can I ask a question? What was this interim planner? And you might be coming in part-time. I didn't
Yeah,
follow
so for approximately 12 weeks, I'm anticipating in the end of June to be taking some time off.
that. Got it.
So,
Thank you.
yep. Conference and seminar fees is level funded. Communications is level funded. Office supplies level funded. Other assessments, this is based on our CMRPC assessment, which is based on population. They generally provide us with a fairly exact estimate. We have not yet received that, so it's slightly conservative. I do anticipate an increase in this number is consistent each year. So I know that this number will likely capture that. I don't anticipate going beyond that number. It'll more likely be slightly less. In-state travel, we removed that last year in terms of there was not any traveling really going on. We are putting that back into the budget. Just anecdotally, there was travel for fees that we had to account for in other line items to accommodate that. So we are adding that back into the budget at $500. And then dues and memberships is level funded as well. So.
My only comment on it, and you can tell Evan, is that the Social Security cost of living increase is at 5.9%. So your cost of living increase of 2% to me is low. Now, I don't know if Evan has any room in the budget for that, but I would say, personally, bring it higher.
Yep. Duly noted, the 2% increase in terms of forecasting the budget is consistent with what we do each year.
Yeah, I know it's consistent. I just
Yep.
happened to notice that the cost of living increase is a lot higher than normal this year.
Yep. And certainly town meeting can consider that, but yep. Duly noted.
Okay, anything else on the budget? At this point, this is a draft budget.
Yes, it is. Yep.
Do you
So if there's
want
any-
or need any motion from the board?
No, so it's more kind of a traditional traditional
Yeah.
practice that the planner has done is to present that to the planning board for their review, and obviously any comments will pass along as needed.
All right.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll pass along my recommendation that you get a raise.
Thank you.
He's probably already sent it, haven't you?
All right, then, our next discussion item is the local rapid recovery program.
Yep. So the local rapid recovery, we've discussed a couple times. So December 17th is my deadline to submit a request for grant assistance in terms of allocating the funding that was set out in the local rapid recovery plan. We have a maximum of 2 projects that we can apply for. I did receive comments back from David Robbins. Thank you. If there's any additional input that the board would like to consider in terms of putting those projects forward, I'm happy to take that into account or simply submit on the 17th based on what we've received so far.
So,
anything else from the board?
Anything else? Any other suggestions from the board? Just to refresh your memories, if you need them. The LRRP study proposed something like 12 projects.
Correct.
Of which Chris is looking to submit a refunding request for 2 of them.
Correct. And not to fund the project, but to assist in allocating the fund or acquiring the funds, I should say.
Yeah.
I didn't pay attention to that, Chris.
Yeah,
What is
so-
this LRRP?
So the local rapid recovery plan was completed. I don't have the date, but we reviewed that and developed that plan. That's looking at the portion of North Grafton. It proposed 12 projects along with kind of brief funding opportunities, a list of funding opportunities that to be explored in terms of implementing those projects. This request is we are looking at choosing 2 of those projects, which will be, the state will, or this program, this grant would finance a consultant to assist in the grant writing and the acquisition of funding for 2 of those projects, which then frees staff capacity to pursue the other projects and funding opportunities. But it provides some assistance in terms of getting all 12 online in a timely fashion.
Can I get back to you by tomorrow on that? Do we still have time?
Yeah. We so the deadline is the 17th.
Okay.
I don't know if we'll have, we won't have a meeting to deliberate, but if there's additional things that you'd like me to consider, I'm happy to try and include them.
Okay. Anything else on LRRP, LRP? The next discussion item is a request from the Open Space and Recreation Committee to have the Planning Board review the responsibilities that the Open Space and Recreation Committee has assigned to the Planning Board. In the interest of time, I will simply mention that and ask board members to review. This is not time critical. So review the document that was posted to the website, and basically the questions are, does the planning board agree in those being the lead responsible party, the lead role for the action items where it's listed for lead? Does the planning board agree with the supporting role it's been assigned for another set of action items? And are there any other action items that the planning board thinks it should be involved in that it's not listed? But primarily, there's one table in there for the planning board, the action items for which we are lead or proposed to be lead, and the items for which we are proposed to be a supporting role. And the question that the committee has is, do those assignments make sense to us as a board? And the committee is not planning to meet again until the middle of January, so the board has time to review these and provide its feedback to the committee, of which I happen to be the board's representative to that committee.
They're sort of, yeah, if that happens, we're the ones. But then there's the gee, that'd be nice to do if we had a way to do it. Which was a lot in the master plan, you know, the old past master plan. You put a lot of things in there, and this one has a bunch of stuff in there too that is
Yes, and
ways, you know, yeah.
you will also notice that
I don't
there
know how those things are going to get done.
Right.
So anyway, the question, you know, the thing we want to be thinking about is that distinction between things that really are we committing to something, you know, that we're going to do it, and where are the resources if we are, and you know, kind of on that level.
Yes, and of course, we all realize that there is no mechanism to force us to do anything. But,
Yeah, but if we agree to this
right, this list has said
that lasts until the next election, I think, doesn't it?
I mean, this.
Yeah, I had one question on the, sorry, if you're done with your response.
Go ahead.
So is this the open source recreation plan? Is that the group where we'll see how do we propose to have playgrounds and so on and so forth? Because our town doesn't have enough of it. And within that was, in terms of, I have talked to a number of people and a lot of requests for having a cricket field. And all our neighboring towns have had it with an average revenue with partnership with some private entities of up to 5K per year. Our town is the only town which seems to be an outlier. Is that the place where we put in a recommendation, or is that what is the placeholder for?
I think the open space and recreation plan has some sort of generic and general kind of broad recommendations, and I think some of those recommendations include additional fields or additional recreation opportunities or facilities. The specifics, when it comes to recreation, the Recreation Commission is the place to go for leadership on that. I mean, the Open Space and Recreation Committee, which, as I said, I'm the board's representative to, is basically our job as a committee, the Open Space and Recreation Committee, is to kind of oversee the implementation of the plan. The Open Space and Recreation Plan has 65 action items assigned to various combinations of 17 different town boards and committees and departments and so on. So it's the responsibility of those various departments to carry out the work, such as it may be. And some of these action items are kind of speculative. They're arranged in priorities, high, medium, and low, and time frames, short, medium, and long. So there's kind of a combination of a lot of things, but it's mostly intended to provide some direction to the various town departments, boards, and committees for things to do relative to open space and recreation. So my committee is pretty much limited to sort of assigning responsibilities and monitoring the implementation. Like our intent is to, once a year to get a report from all the other committees saying, what progress have you made on your action items for the open space and recreation plan? But we're not putting ourselves in charge of really doing anything concrete.
And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that, like, funding a cricket field, that is something that, in theory, the CPA through the town CPC and the town meeting vote could also help fund or actually fund. You would probably want to talk with the Recreation Commission or Rec Department as well. In that sense, someone needs to have possession of land to do it, and the means of some way to actually make it happen. In order to get the funding to do it, of course, but you can't just say I want to do it in that person's yard, for sure. But that's something that you could do with CPA funds in theory.
Yeah. So going back to the agenda item here, the review of responsibilities basically is for us as a planning board is to say, does it make sense for the planning board to be named as the lead party on these action items? Does it make sense for the planning board to be named as a supporting role on these action items, those action items? Whether I happen to know that at least one of those action items, I'm pretty sure that the planning board has already accomplished, namely updating subdivision rules, which I think was one of them. But, you know, there are varying degrees of this thing is really likely to happen, but it's, what we need to ask ourselves is, does it make sense for us to be named as the lead on this and the supporting on that? And though, yeah, making it happen is a whole other question.
Yeah. Why don't we worry about that another night?
Yes, I did not want to get into a lengthy discussion of that tonight. I just want to put it on the table, make sure you're all aware of what we as an Open Space and Recreation Committee are asking of the board. So with that, on the master plan update, I will mention something that I've been doing in connection with that. Much like I've done with the Open Space and Recreation Plan, action plan, with 65 action items, I've just recently reviewed again the recommendations contained in the 20-year-old master plan. And what I've found, there are several recommendations that appear in more than one category. They're grouped in categories like land use, housing, economics, and so on. But it turns out that there are exactly 195 unique recommendations made in that plan. Of those 195, interestingly enough, I've been trying to identify the status of those. Some of them I know they've not been acted on at all. 71 of the 195 we've done nothing with. 33 of them we have completed. Another 18 would be a similar status to completed, except they're ongoing things, so you really can't ever say they're done. 8 of them we've partly done. 8 of them we've abandoned because the idea is no longer relevant. Most notably, the plan proposed in 2000 proposed building an entirely new municipal complex on the assumption that the existing the building we are in now was going to be returned to school use. And of course that never happened. So, there are several of the recommendations were related to that. We just didn't do them. There's no reason to do them anymore. And there's 57 of them that I haven't yet figured out the status of. I'm still working on, so I need to consult with some other departments to try to fill those in. But basically, it's a bit of a surprise that about 30% of them have been fully or partly completed. 30%.
Yeah.
It's more than I expected to find. But anyway, so that's just by way of developing some background information to inform the development of our new master plan. And I won't try to finish this if it doesn't make any sense to try to fill it out and complete it. But if it does, if we think it might be useful for the development of a new or updated master plan, then I'll continue to work on this and determine for all 195 recommendations, did we do it? Did we not do it?
Yeah.
So that's what I have to contribute to the discussion of the master plan tonight.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. In terms of updates for me, I did write a first draft of an RFP for the phase 1 of the project, which is the data collection. I did forward that to the TA's office to get their initial comments. I was hoping to present it to you tonight, but in terms of talking with the TA's office and some of the preliminary discussions with the board, I think I'm going to have to rewrite some portions of it. What we were looking at primarily is I wrote it as just the phase 1 RFP. The board had discussed in terms of all 3 phases. How are we going to do that in terms of different consultants? In talking with the TA's office, and I'm inclined to agree. The recommendation was to go ahead and write the RFP listing all 3 phases of the project and make the award contingent upon funding for all 3, so that we would have a consistent consultant throughout the process. Again, contingent upon appropriation through town meeting for those funding. So if it, for whatever reason, is not appropriated, we can revisit that. But that way there's just one selection process. In terms of process, of the selection, the way we're going to look at it and structure it, and again, I'll be looking for the planning board's input, but initially what we're looking at is there's the criteria, which is normal for other RFPs, you know, that I'm sure the board is aware of. Looking at those evaluation criteria, the planning department and TA's office will make a staff recommendation. We'll present any options that we receive back to the planning board, and they'll make a recommendation to the select board. Ultimately, the select board will be the authority that selects the consultant. We then see that the process of the actual development of the master plan and each of these phases, kind of the checklist items, would be delegated then back to the planning board. So we would actually drive the master plan process through the planning board, and obviously the assistance of the planning department. And you know, not that the select board wouldn't be involved, I'm sure they would track that, but this board would then be the authority of receiving presentations, formal presentations of data and the like, and final presentation of materials, and then obviously final sign off back to the select board once the master plan is completed of all three phases. So that's the initial kind of rough draft. I'll work on that rewrite and have that finalized and presented for the board to review at their next meeting.
One thing I just thought about regarding the RFP that I don't remember raising before is, have you considered or have you done any outreach to other communities, planning departments to say, you know, have you completed a master plan recently? Have you done an RFP similar to how we're looking to do it? And in that, you know, light, you know, compare what we're doing for an RFP to what they did, and asking them if they would have changed anything about it from what their experience was.
Yeah, I haven't looked out to that level of detail. What we did do is in developing the budget for the project, for the master plan update in this way, is we did look at a number of communities who had recently updated. One of those, which really was kind of the driver for this setup of splitting it into 3 years of funding, was from Harvard, and I think it was the Cambridge Master Plan, and so that's kind of probably the closest example. I would still want to use Grafton's typical RFP process. You know, I think we're comfortable with that, and we've seen a lot of success with that process. But to your point, we can take a little bit of a look at that as well, and I'm happy to reach out.
Yeah, I'm not interested in micromanaging the RFP, so to speak. This might help us get a better RFP.
Yep,
You know, that's
absolutely.
kind of my thought.
Yep.
All right, anything else on the master plan? More to come.
Yep.
Moving on then, general business, we've done bills. We have minutes of one previous meeting to review and approve.
I move we approve the minutes from November 8th, 2021, pending any changes during discussion.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I looked through the minutes. Nothing struck me as needing to be changed.
I agree.
Any further discussion on the minutes? Hearing none. Justin.
Aye.
Bob.
Aye.
Linda.
Aye.
Prabhu.
Aye.
Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. Next agenda item is staff report.
Yep, so moving very quickly through this, the three items that I have are the Tier 2 Complete Streets application. The deadline for that is April 1st, so we're still a ways off, but I will be developing that. I did consult with CMRPC, and they provided a draft scope and memorandum of understanding already. I have not cracked those open, but I will be reviewing that obviously with the town administrator's office as well, and working on getting that application to have that work funded. Unfortunately, we cannot start the work and have it reimbursed prior to April 1st, so I'm hoping to have it geared up that once that letter comes back that we're awarded that money, the work will start in earnest. Other than that, we have the zoning drafts that I've talked about previously that we're looking at for Springtown meeting. and we're having consistent requests to do is looking at outdoor dining and a number of updates to the marijuana regulations, looking at how those businesses have rolled out and begun to operate versus the regulations that were put in place before the industry really developed. So we're just going to do some minor adjustments to go in line with updates from CCC and the industry. And then other than that, we have the hazard mitigation plan update. We're continuing to work through that, and we've finished most of the staff review. The consultant is working on the final kind of touches for that plan update, and that will be presented shortly as well. So those are the three kind of big ticket items that I think I wanted to bring the board's attention to.
All righty. Any questions from the board on the staff report? Any comments? Moving on then, correspondence. Did anything in the correspondence file catch anybody's eye? Hearing none. Are there any reports from planning board representatives on town committees and CMRPC?
Prevo maybe knows that they're doing some sort of an opening thing.
Friday, ribbon cutting on Friday.
Yeah, ribbon
For a
cutting
welcome.
at the library.
At 11 a.m.
Is that them?
Yes.
CMRPC, the assessments that you mentioned came past the executive committee, and I think they have to be voted on by the commission, and then, but if you wanted to check with them, they'd tell you the exact number. I didn't capture it to bring with me. Is that it? There was something else. I don't remember. Moving on.
Anything else?
Moving adjourned.
Second.
Moved and seconded that this meeting be adjourned. Justin,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabhu,
Aye.
and Dave votes aye. We are adjourned.